And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Tuesday, January 29th, 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. I'm the co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, and folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored news, analysis, and information you need to know in these perilous times. Folks, we broadcast each and every weeknight live from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us at our home base on the Internet at HomelandSecurityUS.com. You can watch us as well as we're simulcasting high-def video on the Christians United Broadcasting Network. And we want to thank the various AM stations that are picking us up throughout the United States and Canada as well. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you for your belief and trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. Joe, welcome to the studio tonight.
Glad to be here. We're going to have a great show. We got a special guest, a former guest, and
current guest, previous guest, that's right.
A few times. Mr. Larry Grathwohl, who worked with the FBI in infiltrating the Weather Underground, a radical organization that has deep ties to Obama and his administration and what's going on in the country today.
That's right. And without any further ado, we know his time is extremely valuable. And folks, if you don't know who Larry Grathwohl is, he's really a personal hero of mine. Back in the late 1960s, early 70s, within that time period, Mr. Grathwohl had become an informant for the FBI and had infiltrated the domestic terrorist organization called the Weather Underground. And the Weather Underground was staffed by people such as William Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, the infamous husband and wife couple that are we know now are comrades, if you will, of Barack Hussein Obama and his ilk. He's with us tonight. We're just going to go right to you. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm fine. How are you?
Just fabulous. It's a pleasure having you with us. Since you were last here, by the way, we've grown a little bit. We're now downloaded in 41 countries, and we're just growing at a record pace. So a lot of people may not have heard your previous interviews, or if they have, it's been a while since. But at any rate, Mr. Grathwohl, what, if you don't mind, just for the new listeners that we have, and for people unfamiliar with yourself, can you just give a little bit of a background as to how you came to infiltrate the Weather Underground back in the day?
Well, it all began shortly after I got out of the Army. I was attending the University of Cincinnati, and the weathermen approached me and asked me if I would join them in their planned attack on the city of Chicago. They called this the Days of Rage. It was in October of 1969. And my first reaction was to kind of dismiss them as a bunch of nuts. But they gave me some literature to read, and I read it, and then I contacted the Cincinnati Police Department, and they asked me to go to the meetings that I had been invited to. And then later I realized that the group was really a national organization, that they weren't just located in Cincinnati. So I went to the FBI. Ultimately, when the group went underground in late 1969, I was the only source of information left in the organization, and therefore I'm the only one to have successfully infiltrated the Weather Underground. I was with them during the days preceding their going underground, when they were still an above-ground organizing group. I was there when they, as I said, when they first went underground and were organizing their cells and what they called their attack on the symbols of authority. here in the United States. Their intention was to overthrow the government and replace it with a democratic centralist government or socialism or communism. They made it very clear that they believed that they were going to succeed in this because of the contacts that they had with the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and other communist countries throughout the world.
Wow. All right. So you actually, at the risk of your life and limb, you actually infiltrated this domestic terrorist organization and really posed as an insider. And this obviously gave you insight into what their plans were at the time. And at the time, it's my understanding that this was a pretty well-structured organization. I mean, this was not a ragtag group of individuals, but they had some sophistication to them. Is that a fair statement?
Well, they had received training in Cuba and in North Vietnam. They had, maintained very close ties with both of those countries, not to mention the Soviet Union. Kathy Bodine went to one of the universities in Moscow, and so I mean they were very closely affiliated and very well trained, especially in organizing. The biggest fault that they had was that they didn't have the street experience or the military experience when it came to building bombs, and ultimately because of that there was a townhouse explosion in February of 1970 in which 3 of them were killed. But it's important to note that their objective was what they referred to as strategic sabotage. Their first goal was to help the North Vietnamese in their war of independence against U.S. imperialism in South Vietnam, and the second objective was to overthrow the government. Now, these were people who were highly educated. Some of them had master's degree and doctorate degrees from some of the most prestigious colleges in our country, and so they weren't to be taken lightly. They were very well organized I would call them a paramilitary organization. They had a leadership collective, which Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers were part of, which ostensibly Bernardine Dorn was the head of. And when you got instructions, or more appropriately orders, from the Central Committee to do something, you were expected to do it. So yes, they were very well organized. They had been trained extensively in Cuba and in North Vietnam, and they, unfortunately, or I should say fortunately for us, the Cubans and the North Vietnamese hadn't spent a lot of time teaching them how to create bombs and explosives, or things would have been a whole lot more serious during that period. As it is, they killed at least one police officer, and actually more like 4. There was 2 police officers killed in New Jersey and a Brinks guard during a Brinks armored car robbery, and then 1 police officer at the Park Police Station in San Francisco was killed in an explosion. The New York police headquarters bombing resulted in the injury of several police officers, and that doesn't even take into account the great risk that the public could have, and did find themselves in when the Weathermen placed bombs in the Capitol building and the Pentagon and numerous other places.
Wow. Okay. Now, your position, or your, at least initially, your position was to carry directives throughout the organization.
Yes.
To hand carry, and I take it that was because they suspected perhaps some surveillance by the authorities. Was that to circumvent surveillance, or was that for some other reason?
During the above ground period, when they were still organizing, they thought there was an FBI agent behind every bush or in every telephone booth. So we went to extensive efforts to try to cover our trails and look for any kind of surreptitious activity by surveillance. And of course, there was quite a lot of it by the police at that time.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you were Okay. Well, it's interesting, for them to circumvent surveillance. They actually, it's almost ironic that they used you to attempt to circumvent surveillance when in fact you were working on behalf of the good guys in this case.
Oh yeah. And as a matter of fact, there's a picture of me at the National Council meeting in Flint, Michigan, and I was the guard on the door. I wasn't supposed to let anybody in that didn't have the proper credentials. So I find that quite humorous. That, I was the security and actually was the source of information for the FBI at that time. When they went underground, I became what would have been called a courier. I took instructions from the Central Committee to the various cells that were operating in different cities, and also had been assigned to some of those cells. In Detroit, Michigan, at the behest of Bill Ayers, with instructions specifically from him as to what kind of bombs we were supposed to place and how we were supposed to build them. And I'm going to digress for a minute. Bill and Bernadine today claim that they were merely an anti-war group back in the 70s and the 80s. And if that's the case, then why did Bill instruct us to build a bomb with fence nails and roofing nails? That's shrapnel, and the only purpose for putting shrapnel in a bomb is to kill or injure people. He told us to put the bombs in the Detroit Police Officers Association building in the 13th precinct at a time when it would kill the most police officers. I mean, I sat across the table and looked him straight in the face, straight in the eye when he said that, and today, of course, he denies it.
And of course, today, here we have today, Mr. Grathwohl, Bill Ayers, who close to President Obama, and he is being heralded now as this. What's he called? He actually is a distinguished professor of education and a senior university scholar. So we've gone from domestic terrorists planting bombs in an attempt to kill and maim people, including our police officers, to this distinguished professor of education and senior university scholar. So, wow, how far we've gone, since the 1960s.
Even last year, he was in an interview. Heard you said, "I get up every morning and think, today I'm going to end capitalism."
Yeah,
and that's been a goal of theirs for a long time. They've declared war on the U.S. and the free market, and they carried out attacks and got away with it.
And Bill goes around today, at various meetings at schools or wherever he gets the stage, and tells people how the end is near, that they've almost succeeded, and this is what we need to do in order to make sure that the U.S. crumbles. Essentially, he's been a professor teaching teachers for, 30 or 40 years, so essentially he's been involved in the education system and the education of at least 3 or 4 generations of people who now have been indoctrinated into his way of thinking. And the revolution that they were fighting or were trying to fight in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s now becomes non-essential, because a good percentage of the population is willing to turn their freedoms over to Obama and people like him, thinking that this is the best thing that they can do for the world and for themselves. And they don't realize that they're giving up freedoms that they'll never be able to get back. Obama and Bill Ayers have been very good friends for a very long time, possibly going back to Obama's undergraduate days at Occidental College. I mean, we've got established that Barack Obama knew the Ayers family back in those days. So, how long has that association been going on? And, when they had the Annenberg Challenge in Chicago, Bill Ayers raised about $100 million and then put Barack Obama in charge as the chairman of this fund, where they dispersed this $100 million to various educational organizations, and yet Barack Obama and Bill Ayers claim that they hardly know one another. Well, that's not true, and Bill Ayers and Barack Obama's beliefs are very much parallel with one another. And we've got a president who's attacking the First Amendment, who's attacking the Second Amendment, who thinks that he's above the Constitution. The Supreme Court has just ruled that those appointments that he made during a recess were not legitimate, and now it brings into question all of these decisions that have been made via the NLRB and another organization. I forget which one it is. So this president essentially has been the imperial presidency, if you will, and has driven us, into $16 trillion worth of debt, and wants the debt ceiling raised so that he can keep on spending. It just goes on. And, sometimes I listen to what Bill says when he's on YouTube, Bill Ayers, and it's like, maybe he's right. Maybe the best days of the United States are behind us, and possibly he's going to succeed through Barack Obama and others like him, where the violent revolution that they were proponents of back in those days is no longer necessary.
That's a scary thought. Obviously, you see the fingerprints of the Marxist revolutionaries like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn and Mark Rudd and people like that here in America today, in the halls of power today. I suspect that's the case. Wouldn't you say that that's accurate? Yeah.
I mean, don't you? When you look at it, our president is, here's an attack on the Second Amendment, right? They're getting ready to pass all kinds of laws to restrict firearms ownership. And then all of a sudden yesterday he's on the news saying that the problem is that there's certain news organizations that are constantly criticizing the Republicans, and therefore yes.
Yeah.
I'm hearing an echo.
Yeah. I don't know if you're still with us there. I apologize for that echo. Okay.
Yeah, I heard that echo. I thought one of you were talking. But anyway, no. Here's the president now getting ready to attack the Second Amendment or the First Amendment, which is radio programs and TV programs like yours. The Hagmann report. Hey, watch out. If you don't agree with Barack Obama, if you question some of his policies, then you're part of his problem and part of the problem as far as he's concerned, and he's out to get you. We had an enemies list when Nixon was in office, and boy, the Democrats made a heyday out of that. Well, this president has the complete conservative element in this country under attack, and if we object to anything that they say or do, then we're either racists or we're trying to thwart his efforts to bring America into the 21st century.
No, you're exactly correct. This and we know, by the way, we know that even our broadcasts are being monitored by individuals and by organizations that are connected not to the Obama administration, if you will, but we could trace back to the campaign people. Well, I guess I would still be the administration, but we're seeing this take place, and it's hard to even comprehend, and it's even harder to explain to people that this is the mindset of the people in power, of the Obama people in power. Now, anyone around, I mean, who else besides Obama, of course, and you've got the usual cast of characters, but who else do you have your eyes on within this regime that you feel is a really bad influence?
Eric Holder is I mean, he's
sure
he's like the right hand of Barack Obama. And you certainly have to watch anything he does. I mean, he's a liar. the Fast and Furious gun thing, he denied having any involvement in, and anyone with any ounce of common sense realizes that nothing of that level happens in the Justice Department without the Attorney General approving it. But, you look at his entire cabinet, and it's full of people who are part of the extreme left or have been part of the extreme left. I don't have the list of names right here in front of me, but it's other people have brought this out, Cliff Kincaid being one of them, that the administration is just full of extreme leftists. They associate with other ex-weathermen such as Jeff Jones. He's been part of the Apollo project and was working with the administration on that first stimulus package back in 2008, and also was involved in the health care issue. I don't know what he's doing right now, but he was part of that. Howie Mottinger was a teacher down in, I believe it's North Carolina or South Carolina, and he's also been part of some organization that's supposed to be trying to defend people's civil rights. And again, this is one of the leaders of the Weathermen. He was part of the Central Committee. Mark Rudd is a teacher was a teacher in Arizona. I don't think he is any longer, but he also is, just quite content with everything that he did and that is going on right now. As a matter of fact, he's told me, I've actually talked to him, confronted him at a speech he gave at Cal State Hayward, and he tells me that Bernadine Dorn is like a sister to him, and he's never going to say anything negative about her. Now, something interesting about Mark Rudd is in his book, he writes that he talked to Terry Robbins about 2 or 3 days before the townhouse explosion. And during that conversation, Terry Robbins told him that they were building bombs to be placed at Fort Dix, New Jersey. They were going to put them down when the Enlisted Men's Club and the Officers Club was having a dance so they could kill as many soldiers as possible. And Mark Rudd approved of it. Now, he says that in his book. The name of the book is My Life with SDS and the Weatherman Underground. And where I come from, that means that he was part of a conspiracy in which 3 people died. Now, I'll admit that the people that died were weathermen, but regardless, that makes him part of a conspiracy in which people were killed. Why isn't anybody doing anything about that? Isn't that grounds for a grand jury?
One would think so, and we still have. In addition to that, of course, we still have the Park Police Station bombing that, to my knowledge, no one has been arrested for. That act of terrorism, back in February of 1970, that took the life of a police sergeant. One would think that there would be some sort of active investigation taking place, or I don't understand this. I mean, well, how can we go 3 decades, 4 decades without any type of without any justice taking place?
Well, wasn't there a time in this country when if you killed a policeman, they would hunt you down to the end of the earth, and you would be brought to justice? Evidently, today it doesn't matter anymore if you kill a policeman or not. Now, here's an interesting fact about the Park Police Station. I was told by Bill Ayers that Bernadine Dorn placed that bomb on the window ledge that killed Officer Brian McDonald. Of course, that's secondhand information, so it can't be used in a court of law. But later, a girl named Karen Latimer corroborated everything I said to another FBI agent, but because they couldn't work out a deal with the San Francisco prosecutor, they never used that information either. Karen was found dead several years ago of an apparent overdose in New York City, but she had become a born-again Christian, which flies in the face of her going, using drugs. Anyway, they didn't do anything when they first interviewed her in the 70s. They went back to her in the 90s, and she was very upset that they were revisiting this so many years later. Now, in 1971, the FBI discovered a bomb factory on Pine Street in San Francisco. It was a Weatherman bomb factory. They found fingerprints from Bill Ayers, Mark Rudd, Jeff Jones, Hallie Mautinger, and the list goes on. Unfortunately, they didn't find Bernadine Dorn's fingerprints in that apartment. However, they found C4, they found wires and detonators, timing devices, and they also found something else very interesting. And keep in mind that the Weathermen today, Bernadine and Bill, claim that they were merely an anti-war group. That's all. They found voice-activated detonators. Now, you don't use a voice-activated detonator back in the 70s for anything other than to set off a bomb when someone's talking. Remember, back then they didn't have cell phones, so you couldn't use voice activation, with a cell phone.
Right.
So that kind of substantiates the fact that they were intending to harm people. The other thing they found was latex gloves. Now, in the 70s there was no DNA testing. There was no way for them to get fingerprints off the inside of those gloves, but we could today. Now, purportedly, the FBI still has that evidence somewhere. How come someone hasn't dug it up and revisited it with an eye towards trying to bring an indictment against Bernadine Dorn for the murder of Officer Brian McDonald?
Well, I think you might have answered that question just simply because right now we've got Eric Holder as head of the Justice Department, but that doesn't excuse the years prior to that either.
No, it doesn't. And it doesn't excuse the fact that the American people aren't being told about this. This is something that should be on the in the news media across the country. A police officer who was a young man at the time with a family was murdered, was killed, had a fence staple driven through his eye socket into his brain, and it took him 3 days to die.
Oh.
It's just something out of a horror story. And these guys are walking around, and now they're recognized educators, scholars. Are you kidding me? Scholars? Now, Bill Ayers didn't get his emeritus status. He applied for it at the University of Illinois. But when he was in the Weathermen, they wrote a thing called Prairie Fire, and they dedicated it to a bunch of people, one of whom was Sirhan Sirhan, who was the assassin of Robert Kennedy. Well, Robert Kennedy's son is on the board at the University of Illinois, and he objected to Bill Ayers getting this emeritus status, and as far as I know, he still hasn't been able to get it.
Which is good. I was aware of that. Yeah, but still, to have these cretins walking around, and I say that knowing full well. I mean, I understand that these people are not normal people to me and to us. One thing that Americans, listeners to this program, and most Americans know you from your Senate testimony. I believe you did testify before the Senate,
yes. And
also you appeared in the 1982 documentary "No Place to Hide," and it was in that documentary you were talking about how these Dorn and Ayers and people like that would say that people would need to be re-educated, and those who couldn't be re-educated would have to be eliminated.
Yes,
that's what people recognize that from you. What was that like? I mean, that had to be surreal.
It was.
What were they saying there? I mean, if you can kind of recount that conversation.
Well, we were having a meeting in Cleveland, Ohio, and Bill Ayers, Mark Rudd, Kathy Wilkerson. I do not believe that Bernadine Dorn was at this meeting. At least I don't remember her being there, and I think I would remember if she was. But anyway, during the course of this meeting, and we're planning, this is the beginning stages of going underground, and we're, of course, talking about strategic sabotage and going underground and everything that means. And, of course, embodied in all of this is the fact that we're going to lead the revolution from inside the belly of the beast, and we're going to destroy U.S. imperialism. And during this conversation, I said, well, what are we going to do when we win? You know, we're going to have to run the country. And nobody had any answers to that. No one had given any thought to it, except that we had to protect our revolution from what they called the counter-revolution. And that would require setting up education centers where about 100 million people would have to be re-educated into the new order, if you will. And they estimated that about 25% of those people, or 25 million, would have to be eliminated. And then, of course, the conversation degenerated into how are we going to get rid of them. Well, you know, we can work them to death, we can starve them to death, we can shoot them, you know, kill the really bad ones like Nixon and Agnew and all of those people who were prominent back in those days. But the irony, not the irony, the sheer scariness of it all was, again, these are people that have master's degrees and PhDs from some of our better universities, and I'm sitting in a room with about, I'm going to say 20 of them, and we're talking about how we're going to kill 25 million people. And they're serious. This is not a joke to them. And, you know, you find yourself looking around the room thinking, you know, is this the Manson family? You know, what are these people?
Wow.
Where did they come from? And how, you know, what has screwed up their heads to the point where they are so certain of their beliefs and their designs and what they need to accomplish that they're willing to kill 25 million people to do it, let alone the fact that they're going to put bombs all over the country. And as Bill Ayers told me when we were planning the DPOA building bombing, I told him that a restaurant next door would be the thing that would be destroyed the most. And he says, well, sometimes innocent people have to die in a revolution. Well, you know, that's fine as long as you're not the one that has to do the dying. And here we are talking about killing 25 million people.
Yeah,
it's just amazing.
That's the most. In the documentary, when you talked about this, you said how these people, Weather Underground, did not have a plan as to what to do to help the economy, to what to do as to meet the needs of the people. Their only objective seemed to be how to get rid of the capitalists and the people who like the America of the old way, and how to just systematically murder them.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind that sort of goes along with what their immediate mission was back then, and that was to go underground and commit these acts of strategic sabotage. So, and whoever got killed in those actions, it didn't matter. Well, their focus after the revolution succeeded and we overthrew the government was to be focused on more killing. You know, they didn't care what happened, you know, to the country as a whole. That didn't matter.
You know what, Larry? Do you see the same gravitation or the gravitation of the same ideology today in our government that you saw back in the late 60s, early 70s with these people? I mean, are we not seeing this play out on a more, I hate to use the word legitimate, but on a government level?
Yeah, look at the legislation, the NDAA, the indefinite detention of anybody who they, the kill list, the drone program, the erosion of all civil liberties and freedoms.
Yeah,
under Obama continued. That was continued through Bush.
Well, and go ahead.
No, it just seems like the ideology is the same. It was taken from a page of Ayers' playbook and the Weather Underground playbook.
Except that the difference now is that rather than trying to violently overthrow the government, they're doing it within the system. and that's the difference. That's the only difference. And come on, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Napolitano has made comments that the biggest threat to this country as far as terrorism is concerned are veterans. Now, that's a comment she made back in 2008. Hey, veterans, I'm a veteran, and you know what? I haven't thought about getting a gun and going out and shooting people ever. And yet the Department of Homeland Security sees me as being a threat. They've established camps already and prisons, and the NDAA gives the authority to the president to suspend civil rights, essentially suspend habeas corpus, and take people and imprison them against their will without any contact with family, friends, or the legal system. And I mean, that's on the books and active today. Now, it was signed by President Obama. Now, you know, don't you see our country moving in that direction? His speech yesterday about the First Amendment. You know what the problem is? It isn't that he isn't bipartisan. It's that the Republicans won't negotiate with him because of all of the pressure that's being put on him by the right-wing news media, Fox News, the Hagmann and Hagmann report, Lori Ross, right? It's all our fault, not his, not Obama's, and
no,
you know,
of course not.
Go ahead.
You just make a lot of great points here, and I guess what really where I'm coming from, and John, I talked before the program about this, is you having such an insight from the inside, seeing this almost mature, if you will, this whole mindset go from the revolutionary mentality in the late 60s, early 70s, and mature as it has really grasped our government as it stands right now. You've had this unique opportunity to watch this from the inside out, and seeing this develop. Joe and I were talking before the program. We want to ask you, where do you see America left unchecked at this point? Where do you see us in, I don't know, in 2 years, and a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Do you see us going fast, fading fast, or succumbing to these plans of people like Bill Ayers and Bernard B. Dorn?
Well, you know, that's a troubling question, and it's even a more troubling answer. Unfortunately, I don't see things getting better. I see a lot of people who for whatever reason, find it necessary to support bigger government, either because they're feeding at the government trough, and of course, if they don't pay taxes, you know, they have no stake in the game, and so what difference does it make if they raise taxes? I'm not paying them anyway. We are probably going to go bankrupt in the next 4 years. The United States cannot sustain this debt and continue to do it and have the Chinese buy us and own us to the tune of another $4 or $5 or $6 trillion. So you know that's a very bleak outlook, because the Republicans had a perfect chance to curb the spending by not raising the debt ceiling, and they caved. They gave them another 3 months, right? So these people who quote unquote are conservatives and are supposed to have our best interest at heart simply don't have the stomach or the courage or whatever it is that they lack to do the right thing. As far as what is going to happen on a political level, I think the attack on the First Amendment, the attack on the Second Amendment, the attack on religious freedom that's happening right now. I mean, it's not as if we can focus on one area and say, okay, let's put our resources and stop them here. They're coming at us from all different directions simultaneously. it's difficult to get people, especially conservatives, to unite and face this struggle as one unified group. Instead, we seem to be very fragmented, and we seem to focus on one issue, and someone else focuses on another without realizing that we got to stop all of it. We can't let them take our guns. We can't let them destroy freedom of religion. God belongs in this country, and we're not as a Muslim country. We're a Christian country. Our founding fathers were Christian. They based much of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence on a belief in God. And the First Amendment the First Amendment is the keystone of this country. If we can't have separate ideas and disagree with one another, then we've reached the end of United States of America as we know it. As much as I dislike ABC and NBC and CBS, I would be the first one to object if Bush or any other president tried to shut them down because he disagreed with what they're saying. As angry as they make me, they have a right to say and think and do what they will, because that's guaranteed to every American. And what this president's trying to do is to shut down those that disagree with him and those that object to his policies by calling them un-American and calling them racist and anything else he can do to try to shut us up and degrade our message.
Mr. Grathwell, I don't know if we asked you this before, but in these meetings that you had where they talked about eliminating up to 25 million people, putting people in re-education centers, were they ever specific about anybody's religious affiliation, or was it strictly the American way, old way of American thinking capitalism versus the new way?
Well, basically, that was all-inclusive. You kind of got to remember that in their opinions, they're atheists. There is no God, and therefore anyone that believes in something, above the state, above politics, is an enemy of their way of life, their beliefs. That would include all Judeo-Christian organizations, as well as anyone who's on the conservative side. Or for that matter, even people who are just what you might call progressives or liberals. A lot of them wouldn't fall into the New Order because they might still believe in, as an example, the freedom of the press or freedom of religion. Remember, in the communist organization, everything belongs to the state, and the state decides what you will think and do and believe, and that's just how the Weathermen were. That's what they believed in, and that's basically the direction we're going in right now under this administration. And the Republicans, who claim to be the conservatives and the defender of our American way of life, well, when they've had an opportunity to do something, as an example, during the Bush administration, there was a time when the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate and also the presidency. Why didn't they do something about the debt then? They had a chance. Why didn't they do something about the immigration problem? They had a chance then. And instead, they're too worried about another election. And therefore, I think one of the solutions is to impose term limitations. If these guys don't have to be worried about the next election because they can't be elected, then maybe they'll start to focus on what's important for America and what's important for Americans.
I love that. If we could have term limits on our congressional critters, that would be a fantastic. That would be a place to start anyway. Man, yeah, I love that. Now, you know what, Larry? I remember. I think maybe the interview before last that we did together, you were talking about, and you have to tell us the status of this, and I could be wrong on some of the particulars, but Wasn't there a Hollywood movie, Robert Redford, I believe it was, producing some sort of Soros-funded film?
Yep.
To glamorize it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The Company You Keep, and it'll be coming out on April the 5th. It's going to be released simultaneously in New York and in Los Angeles. I don't know which location I'll be at. I haven't been unable to get a copy of the entire movie. I've seen the trailers. Basically, this movie is based on Neil Gordon's novel, The Company You Keep, and it's about a weatherman who is involved in a bank robbery that results in the death of a police officer, but he's really not guilty. And I can't think of who's in it. It's Robert Redford's the main character, but there's another one of the stars that her name just slips my mind. But anyway, a reporter figures out who he is after he's been hiding for like 30 or 40 years, and Redford has to take off and try to find somebody who can clear his name. He wasn't really responsible for this guy's death. And basically the novel, and I would assume the movie, goes through, his machinations to try to prove his innocence, and in doing so flashes back to the days when they were underground. And the female star, upon being arrested, there's pardon me, in one of the trailers, she says, we weren't right, but we weren't wrong. So basically they're glorifying the weathermen and making them out to be the heroes because they brought home the fact that the war in Vietnam was illegal, and their actions helped to stop the war. And anyway, it's just a glorification and a rewrite of history.
Yeah. Weaver.
Yeah. That's right.
The good old Hollywood twist to this, the glorification of terrorists. Now, of course, I think the only redeeming thing would be to realize that maybe you're portrayed by a handsome young in the movie. You're portrayed by a handsome young actor, but then that's probably not
even
the case.
In it.
No, okay.
There's no mention of me.
Wow.
Of course not. They don't want any reference to me because they know that I'm out here and that I'm telling the truth. Remember, I've been before a Senate committee, 3 grand juries. I've written a book, and by the way, the book is scheduled to be released at the end of this month, or the first part of next month. We've updated it, included some more pictures, photographs from the Pine Street bomb factory. But anyway, they know I'm out here. And interestingly enough, I was talking to somebody, one of the people helping me republish the book, and I told her, I said, I don't think that the weathermen are that afraid of me, but I think that if things start to heat up, that they'll become more concerned. And she says, you know what, Larry, I think they're scared to death of you. And I said, why? And she says, because you're the truth. And it's,
wow.
Again, everything that I've said, every time I've had to testify under oath and in the book, I'm stuck with that story. I can't change it. These guys change their minds all the time, and they rewrite history according to how they want it to be, not how it actually was. Diana Oughton, one of the people who died in the townhouse explosion that was building the bombs for Fort Dix, New Jersey, just before she left Detroit, Michigan, her and I were together, and she made a comment to me. She says, Larry, don't you think that this is an awful lot of violence? And I said, what do you mean? And she says, it just seems to me that we're getting into a rut where it's violence for the sake of violence. And I wanted so badly to tell her, Diane, run. But I couldn't. I couldn't tell her. If I had, I would have blown my cover. And that bothers me to this day. Maybe if I had been able to say something, maybe she would have not wound up in that explosion in the townhouse in New York City.
Wow, that's a pretty weighty thing to carry with you. But she was there by choice.
I know.
Although it seemed like maybe she might have been having some second thoughts. But by the way, your book that's coming out, it's going to be Bringing Down America, or it'll still be named Bringing Down America?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And folks, I would urge everyone.
Pardon?
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. I would urge everyone, all of our listeners, to grab a copy at the end of the month, Bringing Down America by Larry Grathwohl. Wow. I can't wait to get my copy and to read it, because, man, you know what, Joe? I mean, having done some undercover work, never to the extent of you, of course, Mr. Grathwohl, but having done some work, undercover work with the FBI, it's not easy, and it's dicey at times. Did you ever feel afraid for your life at all with these people?
Well, there was times. There's one incident I recall when we were still above ground. This is just before the group went underground. They did what I refer to as the acid test. We all met in a different location. We weren't in any of our houses, and they started passing out acid. They believed that drugs used in in a self-criticism environment were mind-expanding. Now, their attitude toward drugs were much like ours. They wouldn't allow them into the collectives. We weren't allowed to use them unless it was under direction and for some specific reason. But I took note of the fact that an awful lot of people were getting acid, and I thought, there's something unusual going on here. So I made sure that when they gave me mine, I acted like I took it, but I put it in my shirt pocket.
Mm.
And as the night went on, they began a criticism session of me, and this thing went on for hours. They told me I was a pig. They knew I was a pig. And I'm sitting in a room with about 25 of these people, some of them shouting at me, and I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do? If I've got another room that I have to run through, and there's people in there that are asleep on the floor in order to get to the door and get outside. And finally, after, I'm going to say maybe 9 or 10 hours of this, I jumped up out of the chair and I said, yeah, you're right, I'm a pig. And so is everybody in this room, because, we're sitting around here BSing one another instead of being out there on the streets making a revolution. Well, Lenin couldn't have wrote a better line for me. And, I was the greatest thing since Rice Krispies. It worked. But
wow.
For a while I was a little concerned. Now, also, if you've worked with the FBI, you know that they can be, a really conservative organization, and they can make life difficult for you also. When I was in Detroit and we were planning the bombings at the 13th Precinct in the DPOA building, Bill Ayers suddenly came in one night and said, okay, I want to know everything you've planned, everything you know about these locations. And then when that was over, he said, okay, I'm reassigning you and these other people to Madison, Wisconsin. So I managed to get one day away from him, and I met with the FBI. It was on a Sunday. And the supervisor was upset that his Sunday afternoon had been interrupted. And he was very angry with me because I was leaving Detroit. And he said, well, what if we told you you can't leave? You just tell them that you have to stay here. They wanted me to stay in Detroit because they wanted all the information that they could gather about those two bombings. And I told them, I said, I think the bombings are going to take place. They're just going to be a few days later than what we had originally planned. Well, I finally got mad at this guy and told him, I said, look, this is a paramilitary organization. I've been given instructions to go to Detroit, and if I don't go, I'm out. So, you decide. It don't make no difference to me. And, of course, the next morning they came back and said, okay, you can go to Detroit. But, there's times when you find yourself pushing them because, they have their own agenda. They want to take care of their field office. And don't you know, those two bombings actually took place. They put 13 sticks of dynamite at the DPOA building and 34 sticks of dynamite at the 13th precinct, but fortunately neither bomb went off.
Wow. Holy cow. For some reason, I did not realize that that bomb, or that was that big, 34 sticks of dynamite in one location? 34
sticks of dynamite at the 13th precinct.
Holy
cow. Another city block.
Now, the bomb didn't go off because of why?
Detonator.
What happened?
Detonator didn't work. That's all I know. I know that they had continued the surveillance on the two locations after I left Detroit, and about 3 days after the original date we had planned, one of the people who was on the surveillance at the DPOA building noticed a bag in a walkway between the DPOA building and the Red Barn restaurant, and it wasn't blowing down the alley like the rest of the trash. They went over and looked in the bag, and there was 13 sticks of dynamite with roofing nails and fence staples. They then went to the 13th precinct, and they found the 34 sticks of dynamite on a window ledge with fence nails and roofing nails. And fortunately, both bombs failed to detonate. And, that was one of the first bombings that the weathermen were attempting. But interestingly enough, the bomb at the Park Police Station was placed on a window ledge. In this case, it was C4 instead of dynamite, and it was had fence staples for the shrapnel effect, and it went off during a shift change.
Well, the worst possible time for a bomb to go off, but it was planned. It was timed to go off at that time.
That's what we were told to do in Detroit. Put it there when the greatest number of people would be killed or injured. And
there were lots of bombings. Just going through a short list here, they bombed the Chicago police vehicles. They bombed the National Guard building in D.C. They bombed the New York City Police headquarters. The Park Place police bombing in San Francisco with Jim Pera.
That killed Sergeant Brian McDowell.
Yeah, the Pentagon.
McDonnell, I'm sorry.
The Pentagon, and much more. And in 1981, Ayers said, while being interviewed by David Horowitz after he walked out of his trial, guilty as hell, free as a bird, America is a great country.
Yes. And there's a picture of him standing on the American flag with that very quote underneath it. Now, this is the guy who's given the keynote address at the Educators Conference in Atlanta next month.
Yep.
Doesn't that make you feel good? All warm and fuzzy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He also gave
September 11th.
Excuse me?
Sorry, Larry. Go ahead.
He gave an interview to the New York Times, ironically, that was published on September 1st, 2001, that he regretted nothing that he had done when he was a weatherman underground, and if he regretted anything, it was that the weathermen didn't do enough. One other thing, they found a bomb in the San Francisco headquarters, downtown San Francisco, in a ladies' room in a drain, and the bomb didn't go off, and the weathermen, or I think it was another organization, claimed credit for it. And when they finally found the bomb, it was because somebody was cleaning the floor and the drain was stopped up, and they opened the drain and pulled out this bomb. And the detonators and the wires that were used for the detonator matched the detonators, and the tools had the same tool marks as the ones that they found in the the Pine Street bomb factory.
Yeah. So okay. So what you're saying is that there were more bombing attempts than are actually documented.
Yes.
From Katie from Brantford, Ontario, just sent me a question to ask you. Do you feel, Mr. Grathwohl, that the FBI had screwed up or otherwise missed any chances to move in on the Weather Underground? In other words, they didn't do enough at the time when you were part of the undercover operation. Could they have done more?
Well, of course, hindsight's 20/20, and you can look back at it and say, yeah. As an example, when they arrested Linda Evans in Greenwich Village in April of 1970, I was meeting with her, and I tried to talk them out of that meeting. I said, if you let me go for a few more weeks or a couple months, we're going to get a lot more of them than Kathy Wilkerson and Linda Evans. It wasn't Kathy Wilkerson, it was Linda Evans. And no, they insisted that they had to make an arrest right now. Well, in Rudd's book, he admits that he was there. And Linda Evans and I were supposed to meet in this restaurant and then walk across the street and meet Mark Rudd in another restaurant. And, of course, when we went out of the restaurant, her and I, the FBI agents swooped in and arrested both of us. They arrested me for assaulting a federal officer. I told them, if you arrest her and walk off and leave me, I'm done. But I thought I'd be done anyway, and I was. I was the newest person in the organization, and the Weathermen never trusted me again after that. But yeah, if the Weathermen, or pardon me, the FBI had listened to me, and done what I had asked them to do, we would have gotten more of the people, a little while later. What killed the case later on was that the FBI was operating under instructions that had been issued as an executive order by President Roosevelt during World War II. And what this executive order says, that in the case of foreign agents, and that can include U.S. citizens who are operating as agents for a foreign government, are operating here domestically, that the FBI has no restraints on what they do to catch those people, to prevent whatever they're doing. Now remember, that was motivated very much so because of the sabotage that the Germans and the Japanese were trying to, bring home to this country. But that hadn't been lifted. It was still in effect. So what that said is that the FBI could use wiretaps without getting a judge's order. They could use surreptitious entries, that is, they could go in and inspect somebody's apartment to see if there was anything in there that indicated that a fugitive or a operative was in that location without a warrant. But later on, when in the 80s, when these guys started surfacing and they tried to use that evidence against them, it was determined that the FBI had violated their civil rights, that executive order didn't apply to them, and the judges threw all of the evidence out. If he would have made the arrests back in the early 70s, none of that would have happened, right? That history would have been prevented because we would have caught them in the beginning. And of course, it just didn't happen that way.
Wow.
Mr. Grathwell, we're up against the top of the hour break. Would you be willing to stay with us
for one more segment? Oh, beautiful.
Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Tuesday, January 29th, 2013, with our very special guest, Larry Grathwell. He has a long history of being involved in infiltrating the Weathermen, the Weather Underground group associated with Obama and the presidency, and what's going on today.
White Patriot. Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eileen Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
Survival of the fittest. In any and all situations, survival is your number one priority. That requires being tough and thinking smart. And the folks at Freeze Dry Guy are going to help you do just that. They have the long-range patrol ration entrees, what they call the brick pack. When you're in survival mode, it is absolutely the best item for your survival pack or bug-out bag. You can go farther, faster, and carry more food with the LRP cold weather ration entrees. Not only do these long-lasting, durable entrees help sustain you or your family through the harshest environment or situation, they are by far the most delicious of their kind. No contest. With a variety of tasty entrees, you can't beat the LRP brick packs. Let Freeze Dry Guy help you in your survival situations. Go to freezedryguy.com. That's freezedryguy.com, or call 866-404-3663. That's 866-404-FOOD.
Hold on to your seat. The Hagmann and Hagmann flight is now taking off. Doug and Joe Hagmann have cleared the runway of TSA agents, jihadists, political crackpots, and global elitists. Now get ready for some real news. Here they are, Doug and Joe Hagmann.
Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special Tuesday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. All 48 lower states, the other 2 states, all across the world. I want to welcome you to a live broadcast, of course, today, Tuesday, January 29th. Our very special guest, Mr. Larry Grathwohl. I'll tell you what, folks, you're not going to find a better patriot than this gentleman that we have as our guest. Mr. Grathwohl had served in the military honorably and, of course, served our country, even served our Constitution even more coming out of the military, infiltrating the domestic terrorist organization known as the Weather Underground, headed by Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn and others, the Marxist communists of the late 1960s, the revolutionaries from now who now are in positions of power in our own government and academia and so on. And
the highest positions of power.
The highest positions of power.
And President, Attorney General.
And I got to tell you something. You've got to give credit to Mr. Grathwohl. He's talking about paying dues. My goodness, those people in law enforcement listening, you know how difficult it is for someone to be an operational asset for the federal government. And you know what and folks, if you've never been in that position, I suppose you should thank God for that, because it's a thankless job. And of course, Mr. Grathwohl has appeared before 3 Senate hearings and or multiple Senate hearings and grand juries, and of course he's coming out with the new rendition, or the newest updated rendition of his book, Bringing Down America. It'll come out later, or I think you said April, right, Mr. Grathwohl? April?
No, my book should be out at the end of this month or the first part of next month. The movie,
okay.
The Company You Keep, is being released on April the 5th, simultaneously in New York and Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I highly recommend that people don't go see it. It's basically a glorification of the Weathermen and a rewrite of history, making them out to be the good guys, and all of us that were trying to stop them from, committing their bombings and the other things that they did. They broke Timothy Leary out of jail as an example, and so don't go see it. And I wouldn't refer to them as terrorists either. They are domestic terrorists, or revolutionaries, I'm sorry. I call them domestic terrorists, and more accurately, unrepentant domestic terrorists. They don't think they did anything wrong, and by their own words, if they had it to do over again, they'd be happy to do so.
Okay, I apologize for that mischaracterization. So the unrepentant terrorists, period, that's how we'll refer to them as. We've got a question here from June, and looks like she's from New Mexico, I believe, in New Mexico, wanting to know if at any time, wanting to know, first of all, wanting to thank you for everything you've done, but wanting to know if at any time that you directly witnessed either Bernardine Dorn or Bill Ayers engage in any type of direct bombing activity. She goes into a different. In other words, were you present when any bombs were planted? I guess is the ultimate question.
No. I was aware of the plans. As an example, I guess the one I was most directly involved in was the Detroit operation. Bill Ayers was instructing us as to how to build the bombs, where to place them, when to place them, etc. But no, I never actually seen them, handle explosives or handle weapons of any kind. But that, especially for Bill Ayers, was typical. Bill is somebody who lets other people do things for him. He's the leader, and he doesn't feel like he has to get his hands dirty. But I've also been in locations where the explosives were present. As an example, dynamite, 3 cases of it on Pearson Street in Detroit, Michigan, and Bill Ayers was in that house and was in the room where these explosives were being stored. So I know that he, was not only making the plans, but that he also was aware of the fact that we had the materials necessary to commit the acts he was instructing us to commit.
Okay. Well, wow. And yet, folks, let me remind you, Bill Ayers is walking around free as a bird today. Debbie from Arizona wants me to ask you, Larry, if the bombs had exploded, specifically the 2 that you were talking about, do you think that Ayers would have been implicated, and perhaps none of today's events would be happening in the takeover of our government, or at least maybe the whole thing could have been slowed down if the bombs would have gone off?
Yes, I do, and because Bill Ayers' implication through the information I had, and remember this isn't hearsay because him and I discussed these bombings face to face in Detroit, Michigan, I think he would have risen to the FBI's most wanted list immediately, and he would have been taken out. I think because I was there and I met with him after the Detroit operation actually went down. Now, again, I say that if the FBI had not insisted upon arresting Linda Evans in April of 1970, my cover wouldn't have been blown, and we would have arrested more of the leadership. And in doing so, the FBI would have not, been in the position of violating their civil rights because of Roosevelt's executive order, and therefore the acts, the unlawful acts that they had committed, they would have went to jail for. Now, I'll grant you that, in some instances it would have been conspiracy and they probably wouldn't have done a whole lot of time, but the point is that they would have been convicted felons. They wouldn't have had such an easy time to get back into academia that they had, after 1980 when they surfaced, and they basically, as Bill Ayers did, walked out of the courthouse and said, free as a bird, guilty as hell, isn't America wonderful?
Man. Well, okay, wow. That's kind of a sobering answer, too, by the way. Now, also from Debbie in Arizona, could you please have Larry explain Bill Ayers' founding of the Annenberg Challenge and Obama's connection with him in it? What do you know about that? I mean, what's the Annenberg Challenge, Ayers' founding of that, and, of course, yes. Obama's connection?
It's pretty much a public record. I believe you can run Annenberg Challenge over the Internet and get a lot of information about it. Essentially what it is that Bill Ayers went out and accumulated donations to the tune of about $50 million from, I understand George Soros was one of the big contributors, but anyway, regardless, he drummed up $50 million, and then the Annenberg Foundation kicked in another $50 million. When it came time to appoint a chairman of the board, the person that they elected or selected was Barack Obama. Now, consider that you're Bill Ayers and you went out and you've done all the work to get this money together. Are you going to appoint somebody to chair the organization that you know nothing about? Absolutely
Good
not.
point.
And
No.
Another significant thing is that Bill Ayer's brother got, as I understand, at least $100,000 from the Annenberg Challenge, and it might be closer to $500,000. So there was a little nepotism involved in it too. You know, it's pretty nice when you can raise $100 million that essentially are charitable donations, and then hand out grants to the people you want to have it. I mean, think of what any of us could do if we had $100 million at our disposal.
Yeah.
I got a question here.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
right.
Lori Roth, I don't know if you're familiar with her radio program or not. She's out in the state of Washington, and she's begging for financial help right now. She's about ready to have to close down her radio show, and she's been on the air for 13 years.
Yes, Lori's a very, very good friend of ours, and in fact, I filled in for her for the longest time. Lori and I would do Friday nights together.
Yeah.
In fact, I just had spoken to her this week, and folks, yes, those of you who know Lori Roth know that she's been through the mill. She was involved in a motorcycle deer accident that really almost took her life. So thank you for mentioning that, Larry. Lori's a good friend, a very good patriot, and certainly she's got a quality radio program, and we need to help save her because the truth has got to get out there.
Well, anybody that's listening that can make a donation, I mean, she needs money this week or she's off the air. I guess her telephone bill is due and she doesn't have the money. So people, whatever you can afford to donate, I know she'll appreciate it.
Absolutely, and that's therothshow.com, therothshow.com.
Yeah, she's a great lady and exposes the same things we do, and she's on our intro. Yeah, she has an intro song she did for us that we play after the first break. Got a question from a listener here. They asked, given how far you were deep undercover in the infiltration of the Weather Underground and gathering human intelligence, why wasn't the Weather Underground sanctioned for being domestic terrorists?
Well, I think that they were. Again, unfortunately, because the investigation drug out for almost 2 decades and the FBI elected to use the executive order from Roosevelt as a means to justify their unsanctioned wiretaps and surreptitious entries that were later discarded by the government, or not the government, the judicial system, the judges, and were deemed to have been illegal and in violation of the weatherman's rights. That's absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. A foreign agent operating inside the United States doesn't have any rights. And can there be any doubt the number of visits that Bernadine Dorn and other compatriots of hers, Bill Ayers and Jeff Jones and Mottinger, the number of visits they made to Cuba, the number of visits that members of the Weather Underground made to North Vietnam, can there be any doubt that they're operating as agents of a foreign government? I can tell you that they founded the organization called the Venceremos Brigade, and this organization came into existence in early 1970, and its sole purpose was, at least publicly, was to gather students up and send them to Cuba to help harvest the sugar cane. The weathermen created the organization so they could send selected members of the Weather Underground to Cuba for training. And I know that for a fact because they were going to send me, and I said, well, I don't need any training. I've been in the military. So they sent some other people who I met when they returned from Cuba, and they told me about what they, who they had met with and what they had done while they were down there. They didn't chop any sugar cane.
Wow. And tell me again, Larry, what was the name of that organization?
The Venceremos Brigade.
Okay. All right. Wow, and I'm not sure how many people really know the extent of all of this, and the foreign agents, acting as foreign agents. My goodness. Larry, you've been very generous with your time this evening. In closing, do you have any thoughts? I mean, for the next couple of minutes here, we're going to give you the floor. Any recommendations to the public, what we can do, aside from trying to educate people about what's going on? What do you recommend the average American do? What can we do to fight this parasitic stuff?
I think that they need to start paying attention to what's going on in Washington. They need to start putting more pressure on their representatives to represent them and the country rather than these guys in Congress and the Senate representing themselves. At the same time, I think that they have to support their local political organizations that are trying to do something about this. I think they need to look to God and their religion and their beliefs in a more strong manner than what has been happening. I think we take that for granted, and we don't realize that the freedom of religion is under attack also. I think people need to be prepared. Just like for any kind of national disaster, you should have a stockpile of food that can last you for at least a couple of weeks. Water. Don't forget water. That's the most important thing you can have, and I think you have to have the means to defend yourself. I would point out to you what happened in New Orleans during the Katrina hurricane. The police disintegrated. The police stayed home and took care of their own families, and there was no authority, no structure in New Orleans for several weeks. And during that time, you were on your own. If you didn't have water, if you didn't have food, if you didn't have the means to defend and protect yourself, you were in deep trouble. Now, I'm not a doomsdayer, okay? I'm not saying that we need to be, preparing for a revolution or any kind of acts like that, but I think we have to be ready when the NDAA is enforced and they try to haul people off to re-education centers. And by the way, the NDAA actually mentions re-education centers in this law. So this is something we better be prepared to defend our neighbors and our friends and ourselves when these people come knocking. If you have your community united around what you believe in and you're ready to defend your rights, then the government's going to find it a lot more difficult to impose itself on us. And remember, the government should be afraid of us. We shouldn't be afraid of the government. And that's a quote from one of our founding fathers, by the way.
Yeah,
Amen.
That's right. And there is many, there's a few bills that were passed. There's also the U.S. Army Internment and Resettlement PDF where they go into detail about how they might have to resettle terrorist detainees and displaced citizens, and it's a 326-page PDF.
And we're the terrorists.
Right. And I want to go back to what the meeting you were in there, they talked about putting people in these re-education centers. Did they talk about a solution after they killed capitalism and the U.S. economy, what they would bring out of that?
Well, it was going to be what they called a democratic centralist government, which they said was the same kind of government that exists in Cuba today. Okay, a democratic centralist government, it sounds democratic, doesn't it? But as we know in application, it's not. Got a dictator who decides what's going to happen to the people, and it's a very socialist country. Now, if the American people want to live like that, fine, but I think they need to recognize that that's the choice they have to make. I'm not ready to give up those freedoms. I happen to like dissent. I love to hear people who disagree with me defend what they have to say as well as listening to what I have to say. I believe in freedom of religion. I believe in God. And I believe in the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. And I will fight and die defending those beliefs and those rights. And I hope that there's a majority of Americans that agree with me.
Well, you don't have to answer this question, but Larry, but I'll say this ahead of the question. I, for one, will never, ever comply with any type of gun registration or anything to infringe upon my Second Amendment rights. I take it you have the same mindset. Is
Absolutely.
that something? Okay.
Charleston Heston said, "Out of my cold dead hand." And you know, I've actually heard somebody from the left, and a politician at that, say, "Fine, if that's how they want it, then that's what we'll do." In other words, they'll kill us and take our guns away. It makes absolutely no sense. If you look at the crime statistics, most of the crime is committed with illegal guns. So do you think the bad guys are going to register their guns? Heck no. They want to know where the law-abiding citizens' guns are so that when they decide to come and take them, they'll know where to go. The bad guys aren't going to turn theirs in. And the crime rate, if you look at the number of people that are killed with assault weapons, it's minuscule compared to what is killed every day with handguns. So, you know, this whole gun control thing is absurd, and what they need to be focused on is enforcing the laws that they have instead of letting these guys who commit these crimes out on probation, or if it's a first-time offense, they get a slap on the hand. And, you know, come on. If you've got a weapon and you use it illegally, you should go to jail for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting because I saw a quote by Joe Biden, and you just can't make this up. He said recently, we need more gun laws because we don't have the time or manpower to enforce the laws that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's Biden's logic. I mean, you know, thanks, Joe. You know, that makes absolutely no sense at all. And remember that these are the same people who came up with Fast and Furious, where they're letting guns be sold through gun stores legally and then being smuggled across the border to the drug cartels, and then they act like, well, we didn't know that was going to happen. How could you not? I mean, you know, if you've got half a brain, you could have figured that one out.
Yeah,
but the administration didn't.
Well, do you know, that brings me to a good another question here by I'm not sure, Tim, I think it is. Tim T. Do you believe Fast and Furious was an open, overt assault on our attempt against our Second Amendment rights? In other words, was it fashioned for that purpose, to some nefarious purpose to attack our Second Amendment rights? Fast and Furious.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, some of the ATF agents that were involved in it have said as much. The idea was to show that these legal registered gun sellers were violating the law and letting weapons be smuggled into Mexico that then were involved in crimes and murders and killings. And that was going to be used as a further justification for tightening the gun laws here in the United States. Unfortunately, one of the guns came back across the border and killed a border guard. And that's what blew it up in their face. And I believe that. Remember, Rahm Emanuel said that, and Barack Obama has said the same thing, you never let a crisis go to waste. They were trying to make the crisis so they could use it as justification for changing the Second Amendment. Now they've got the shooting in Connecticut in order to justify that. And again, they're not going to let a crisis go to waste. They're going to try to take our weapons away. And there's another one of the founding fathers who was asked what the Second Amendment was all about, and he said it was in order to make sure that the population always had the ability to defend itself against the government. Against the government. That's exactly what the man said. That's exactly what the Second Amendment is all about. And again, if they disarm us, then it's that much easier for them to come in and impose their will upon us, even though we object. And as I said before, the government should be afraid of us. We shouldn't be afraid of the government.
Amen. And truer words could never be spoken. And that's right. The government, they work for us. We pay their salaries. And you're right. They should be afraid of us as opposed to us being afraid of them.
I got a question. I don't know how much you know about this. Is the connection with Valerie Jarrett and Bill Ayers. We know Valerie Jarrett is said to have a huge influence on Obama and his decision-making and his policies. Are you familiar with their connections with Bill Ayers and Valerie Jarrett?
Not a lot, but I know that she comes from the Chicago and the political machine back there. She's a red diaper baby, meaning that her parents were part of the communist apparatus, back whenever she was a kid, and she's had a very big influence on Barack Obama, and I have to believe that there's a connection between her and Bill Ayers. I think that Cliff Kincaid has established the fact that Jared and Bill Ayers are familiar with one another, but I'm not absolutely sure about that.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work with Cliff Kincaid, or at least you've got a professional relationship with Cliff. And he's done marvelous work, by the way. He's confronted Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers on, I think, once or twice, and he's done a lot of work to expose them. Very good. Now, anything in closing? Anything else that we haven't covered that you want to let the listeners know about?
I think I've made my feelings known, and I would again recommend that people start to support their local organizations that are trying to defend our rights. Pay more attention to your religious beliefs and your religious freedom, because it's being brought under attack as well. And I thought that would never happen, but it is. And of course, the First Amendment, and support Lori Roth and all programs like yours and any others that are being attacked by the administration because you happen to disagree with something they're doing. And then buy my book.
Right. And buy your book. I'm going to tell you what, we are going to feature your book on our website and promote the heck out of it, because people have got to read what has truly gone on, and they need to wake up. I want to thank you, Mr. Larry, for your time tonight, and for just for everything you've done and everything you continue to do.
I'm glad to be here, and any time you want me on the show, you know how to get in touch with me. And good luck to you guys. Keep fighting the good fight.
Well, we will indeed, and with yourself and people like you as role models, we will indeed. I want to thank you very much again for your time. God bless you, sir.
God bless
you. And you have a safe night, and until next time.
All righty. The same to you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right.
Thank you, Larry.
Folks, that was Larry Grathwohl. And I'll tell you what a wonderful American, and what a wonderful patriot, a brave man. And, like I said, if anyone has ever been involved in being a operational asset for the FBI, it's not an easy thing to do, because you're getting heat. Not only are you getting heat from where you're at, but you're getting heat from your handlers. And I have a friend who's an operational asset for one of the intelligence agencies, and every time the word handler came up, he said, "Don't ever refer to you as my handler. I don't have any handlers." But it's a very intense. I've got to tell you, it's extremely intense when you are in that position, like Mr. Grathwohl was, and especially in his position when you're dealing with people that blow things up and play with dynamite for real. Wow, that's something. So, a brave man. So his book coming out at the end of this month, Bringing Down America, an FBI informer with the Weatherman, Larry Grathwohl, as told to Frank Reagan. And that's going to be available on Amazon. We'll have a link to it on our website at HomelandSecurityUS.com.
Yeah, and just to recap, if you guys go on YouTube and just type in Larry Grathwohl, you'll see a clip from the documentary in 1982 where he exposes their plan to re-educate or put into re-education FEMA camps 100 million Americans, and they estimated that they'd have to kill 25 million Americans who would not go into the new way of thinking against capitalism and the foundation of America and politics. And what do we see happening today? We have had a communist overhaul of our government a fascist, communist, just totalitarian to the 10th degree, worse than any nation has seen before. And we are going to reap what we sow, because the worst is yet to come. There is disturbing reports on the dollar. There are disturbing reports on China and the currency war. China has threatened the currency war if the Fed doesn't stop printing. That's from today.
Do you think they'll stop? Do you think they'll scare them to stop?
No. I think Ben Bernanke announced that they're just going to go unlimited. What we see happening in the Middle East, Egypt is losing control as they're plundering into chaos and riots. We have the situation in Mali going on. We have the gun confiscation that they are trying to implement on all gun owners. Now we have the debt is headed towards 200% GDP, even after the fiscal cliff deal.
But everything's fine. Look, the economy is fine. It hurts my head, seriously, to think about this. You've got all of this bad economic news, and you've got people saying, well, hey, the job numbers are a little off. When I went to I stopped at the convenience store to get a 32-ounce Big Gulp. No, I'm just kidding. I stopped at the convenience store. I saw the headline on our local paper saying, job numbers slightly off.
Yeah, and I saw this from the Daily Sheeple. Kyle Bass, and there's a thing or two about economics and finance, recently spoke to a senior member of the Obama administration about their planned solutions for fixing the U.S. economy and trade deficit. The answer shouldn't surprise you. When asked the senior member of the Obama administration last week, how are we going to grow exports if we won't allow nominal wage deflation? He said, we're just going to kill the dollar. That worried me.
Wow.
And the interviewer goes on to say, so that's the only answer? He says, yes, it's a dead answer, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah, we touched on that last night. In case you missed that, we touched on that dialogue last night.
Yeah, and then this today, China is threatening a currency war if the Federal Reserve doesn't stop printing their money. Tensions between central banks that were noted yesterday continues to worsen. This time it was China and the EU, not just Germany, that fired warning shots at the U.S. Fed. A senior Chinese official said on Friday that the U.S. should cut back on printing money to stimulate its economy if the world is to have confidence in the dollar. Asked whether he was worried about the dollar, the chairman of China's Sovereign Wealth Fund, the China Investment Corporation, Jin Liquan, told the World Economic Forum in Davos, I'm a little bit worried. There will be no worries in currency wars, or there will be no winners in currency wars, but it is important for a central bank that the money goes to the right place, Li said. French Finance Minister Pierre Moscovici voiced concerned that the euro was becoming overhauled as a result of the quantitative easing and other stimulus actions taken by other nations' central banks. Certainly the level of the euro is at a high and creates some problem, he said, attributing the single currency's recent gains partially to the return of confidence created by the European Central Bank and the Eurozone governments in starting to overcome Europe's debt crisis. So, from Reuters, first, Germany is pulling its gold out of the U.S. reserves.
Or the gold-plated tungsten bars.
Now, China and the EU are saying publicly that the Fed's policies are damaging confidence in the U.S. dollar.
How will history look upon Ben Bernanke, Timothy Geithner, Obama, even George Bush and the people behind him?
Will there be a generation of people to look onto this history?
That's a frightening but very appropriate question. Will there be an American generation after ours that will be able to reconstruct or do a post-mortem on this country? That's something that we have to consider prayerfully.
Yeah.
Before going any further, I just want to touch on something that Larry Grathwell had said. Many people know Lori Roth. And many people know that Lori Roth for the longest time, and we still do. I mean, we're good friends, and she has her nationally syndicated radio program called The Roth Show, and which is heard on the IRN USA Radio Network. And look, folks, I don't know if love her or hate her. I mean, she's a true patriot. She's a true American. She cares deeply about her country. She's got a PhD, and she's been on radio for the past, as Larry said, for the past 13 years. Interrupted only about 5 years ago when she was involved in a motorcycle accident where a deer jumped on her, actually, when she was riding a motorcycle. And if you can imagine that, just imagine that. And she was really, really hurt bad, and she was in intensive care for the longest time and not expected to live. And she came back having to learn how to walk and talk and right from scratch. But she has the Roth show that is heard Monday through Friday, and 3 hours a night, like our program. And at this point, she has. It saddens me because right now she's fighting to survive, fighting to stay in the air, and she's had sponsors that have not kept their contracts, and there have been things that happened behind the scenes where she's been the target of censorship. That's the only way I can put it, without getting into it, because I don't know if she would even want me to talk about the everything that she's gone through.
Yeah.
But I just would want to say this: if you, rather than maybe tonight you're thinking, well, maybe I'd like to support Doug and Joe or whatever, rather than do that, if you can find it in your heart, support Lori Roth. And her program's a good program. She does her best. She's got a lot of great guests. She's had Larry Grathwell on, of course. She's broken a lot of major stories as well.
She's been a keynote speaker at CPAC.
Yeah. And we had the pleasure of spending some time with her in Gettysburg.
Valley Forge.
Sorry. But I just, and Lori never did not ask me to do this or ask us to do this. It just, with Larry, saying this, I just felt in my heart to share that with you. If you want to see her program, continue. She is on the ropes. And her phone bills, are like, I thought our bills were bad, but her phone bills alone, I think, are like $2,000 a month. And that does, and plus the production costs and what have you. And people think, well, you're nationally syndicated, you should have no problems. Well, it doesn't always work that way, and we know that from experience. So, just wanted to mention that. And even if you can't support her or whatever, just send her an email of just a nice email, praying for you, whatever, just a support. And that's therothshow.com, therothshow.com. A wonderful woman and a true patriot. And we're all in this together, Joe, aren't we? All of us that attempt to bring the truth to the public, we're all in this together. So we've got to stick together as an extended family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your prayers too are encouraged for Lori and her endeavors as well.
Yeah. Hillary Clinton called the GOP lawmakers who questioned her in the Benghazi testimony similar to North African terrorists.
When you said that to me today, I thought you were just joking around.
No. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, while lamenting the partisanship of congressional Republicans who grilled her about the Benghazi attack, encouraged Republicans not to imitate the unwillingness to compromise like the terrorists in North Africa.
Right.
And you see this marginalization, and she goes on to say, we're talking about extremists who think it's their only way, the only ones who have the truth, the only ones that have any kind of claim on what is real in their views, she continued. The extremists Clinton was referring to were people asking questions about what happened on that day. Why was the security cut? Why wasn't there help given to the American personnel who were under fire for 8 to 9 hours in gunfights with hundreds of people, 4 Americans, 2 being Marines, or at least 1 Navy SEAL, an ambassador, and 2 other U.S. personnel. And those people, gave their lives, as she said, to save others. At the same time, her testimony was if you watch the parts where she was actually questioned about anything rather than the other people who were just, sucking up to her. She got real irritated and said it doesn't matter if it was a protest.
What's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference? The way they were killed. It's over and done with. Let it go, pretty much.
Well, and thanks for mentioning this, because this brings me to an investigation report that I'll be publishing here in the next 24 hours. Hopefully, I'd love to have this finished by tomorrow morning, if I can finish tonight. One of the biggest things, a critical component vital to an honest investigation into the Benghazi incident and the cover-up that to this day remains untouched by any real investigation is one thing. And you know what that is? That's the cinematic version of the bloody glove at Rockingham. The video, folks, it's the video. I'm talking about the video, The Innocence of Muslims, that supposedly set the Middle East on fire and caused the deaths of 4 Americans in Benghazi. Everyone is pointing to that. Our investigation into the mysterious origins of this video, the people involved, and its politically expeditious characterization as a metaphorical blasting cap, if you will, that detonated the Muslim world, provides some very unsettling insight into key events involving Obama, involving Hillary Clinton herself, Joseph Biden, and even now Obama's selection for CIA director, which is John Brennan. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is important, folks.
Brennan is like the rest of them. He's done his crime to get where he is.
That's right. He's made his bones. So you don't get to that point in the government without having made your bones. And he made his bones. Now, Biden has a role in this video, as does Brennan, as does Clinton and Obama, at various levels. And you might say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, look, we saw the congressional hearings last week, and what we read in the Accountability Review Board report, the ARB report. It's obvious that the Obama White House and the Clinton State Department desperately want us to forget about this video and not ask any questions about it. That's obvious. But in an interesting turn of events, considering that on September 13th, 2012, just 2 days after the attack, Hillary Rodham Clinton condemned the video in a press conference. And, she curiously said, she asserted during that press conference that the United States government had nothing to do with the production of the video. Now, why would she say that? Why would she say that? What would prompt a Secretary of State to get on television to do a press conference and say, well, the video's to blame, but we had nothing. The United States government had nothing to do with this video. It just seems so out of place that we began our investigation. The Hagmann and Hagmann report began our investigation, and considering the minimal references to the video in subsequent hearings and the investigations in the Benghazi, we should recall, and I believe it's important to recall the talking points given to the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Remember that she appeared on no less than 5 Sunday talk shows on September 16, 2012, citing the video as a cause for the Benghazi attack. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Of course we do.
Then they never said it. No, we never did it. We never said it.
Yeah.
We said it was a terrorist action from the beginning.
Right.
Before it even happened, we said it was a terrorist action. What are you talking about?
See, today we are to believe right now that Obama, that Clinton, Rice, even the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney, and others were acting in good faith when identifying the video as Exhibit A to the American people in a case purposely litigated in the media. They litigated this in the media before it even began. To believe this account, the American people, it requires us to forfeit our ability to reason independently. It really does. And not ask any questions off script, and to dutifully keep our eyes glued to that little shiny trinket being dangled before us. Just incredible. Well, lies, you know what, folks, lies like magic tricks require some level of audience cooperation. And magicians tend to get cranky when their sleight of hand is threatened by curious minds. And we've got some curious minds, Joe and I do.
Yes.
So we...
To a fault.
To a fault, that's right. And I got to tell you something. We
affect the efficiency of the way we operate.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We can sit down at like I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning, and say, all right, we're gonna get 5 or 6 things done, and but before we do that, we're gonna we're gonna investigate this aspect of whatever. And it's 7 o'clock at night. Next thing we know, it's 7 o'clock at night, and the other thing that we've accomplished is sucking down about 6 pots of coffee and some cold pizza and trying to get ready for the show. But that said, we do have an investigative report coming out about this video because this is important. We had Steve Klein.
Yeah, he came on the show.
Steve Klein.
We didn't know what to ask him really at the time, as information didn't come out yet about the truth behind the trailer in the movie. Not as much information as we have now,
That was the weirdest interview I think we did.
The guy denied it. First of all, he came on to talk about the film he helped create and then denied anything to do with it.
That's right. The pre-interview we did with Mr. Klein, in fact, I talked to him before the interview, set it all up, and asked him a series of questions, which he answered. And then he came on the program, and I wasn't sure if we were talking to the same guy.
Yeah.
Normally, no, it's a rule where we don't talk about guests without giving them the ability to answer back. Well, Mr. Klein has made it clear that he's not going to answer back, so, but if he's listening, he's free to call in and right now. But here's the problem, folks, and here is, we're going to give you our conclusion right now here before the top of the hour. Based on our investigation that we've done, the film The Innocence of Muslims plays an integral role, an important, very critical role into the cover-up, into what has been taking place. It's got the fingerprints. It's the bloody glove at Rockingham, reference to the O.J. Simpson case. This film ties directly back to elements within our own government. So when Hillary Clinton said the U.S. government had nothing to do with this video, she might not have been, she wasn't truthful in our professional opinion based on our investigation. The United States government had, elements within the U.S. government had a lot to do with the video because as we found out, and we have documented this, the video itself was started. I mean, the very first part began with a casting call on July 14th, 2011. A casting call that was posted on Craigslist that solicited actors and actresses to appear in a movie with the working title Desert Warrior. Now, the video production was supposedly, the producer for this video was supposedly a 65-year-old man by the name of Alan Roberts. But Alan Roberts wasn't really Alan Roberts. He's Robert Burnell, who was a film director and editor of such films as Young Lady Chatterley and The Happy Hooker Goes to Hollywood and Karate Cop, some of those grade A movies. That's who posted the casting call. That's who the director was associated with this film, originally titled The Desert Warrior. And it's interesting because Alan Roberts, or Robert Burnell, whatever his name actually is, his role as a director was allegedly a result of a request by Egyptian native Nakula, or Sam Basile. Now, Sam Basile is allegedly an informant and possibly an operational asset for the United States Department of Justice. Now, the film itself, according to numerous members of the film, they're told that they're appearing in some historical drama set in the Middle East, and they were just tricked into a false plot. And some have stated that they're going to sue the director and sue the film company. And, of course, they said their dialogue was changed to such an extent that the words were dubbed over and the audio was changed and the entire plot was changed without their knowledge.
Yeah.
And just to kind of encapsulate this in a few more minutes we have, and then I'll shut up about this. But this is so important, folks, because it has everything to do with the nomination of John Brennan as the CIA director. It has everything to do with this. And you can bet your bottom dollar that CIA director, this is payoff for John Brennan to be a CIA, to head the CIA. This is payoff. This is payoff. Anyway, the film was scheduled to be shown at the Vine Theater in Los Angeles, California on June 30th, 2012, which was almost a year after the original casting call. And it was shown at the Vine Theater in Los Angeles on June 30th, 2012, under the title The Innocence of Bin Laden. There were 2 screenings that were scheduled, and thousands of flyers, which were written in flawless Arabic, were created and passed out in advance of that date. Folks, you can imagine that. So you've got a film where, originally titled The Desert Warrior, a year later, it appears at the Vine Theater under a different name, called The Innocence of Bin Laden, and the flyers were passed out by none other than Steve Klein in Arabic at various mosques throughout the area. Why? Well, it was to bring together, supposedly it was because of if you ask Steve Klein, it was a method of trying to ferret out the Islamic radicals in the community. Boy, can you say Lee Harvey Oswald, fair play for Cuba? Anyway, as it happened the day before the scheduled event, a gentleman appeared at the Los Angeles City Council meeting, a guy by the name of John Walsh, a blogger, Hollywood resident, very vocal blogger, very well known to Los Angeles people, John Walsh. Not the John Walsh not that John Walsh, folks. Yeah, just another John Walsh. Anyway, he appeared at the city council meeting and said, "Look, you can't show this. I mean, the neo-Nazis," he said, are coming to Hollywood," and said, and he told the council people, "Hey, look, you really, this is a bad idea to show this film." Well, as it turned out, on Saturday, the night of the filming, the theater was rented. The film was supposedly shown. Problem is, no one showed up. I mean, no one showed up. In fact, there were 2 showings scheduled, and one had to be canceled because no one showed up. The theater closed, and the screening stopped without an incident. And it's interesting, though, too, that the alleged screening was scheduled during a time when Orthodox Jews are typically observing the Sabbath. But anyway, there was initially a thought that this screening was supposedly done by someone in the Jewish community. Of course, that's not true. But the following day, and this is where it gets really interesting, and I'll cut this short, but the following day, right after the screening at the Vine Theater, the title of the video was changed from The Innocence of Bin Laden to The Innocence of Muslims. And it was put up on YouTube. On a YouTube channel that had some familiar characteristics with a company that was another production, or another video company, News Politics Now. And News Politics Now has some graphics that are identical to the graphics of a company called Stanley Incorporated. And Stanley Incorporated is associated with, at least in a peripheral way, with the Analysis Corporation. Well, and the Analysis Corporation is headed by, you ready for this? John Brennan. But here's where it gets kind of cloudy. See, the Analysis Corporation back in 2008, folks, you remember in 2008 when there was a break-in of the passport office, Barack Obama, John McCain, Hillary Clinton, their passports were allegedly tampered with, or at least somebody had broken in and looked at their passports. And everyone thought, wow, they were looking at Barack Hussein Obama's passports. And they just had to pick McCain and I believe it was Clinton, just to cover their tracks. What exactly did happen at the passport office break-in? Was the passport merely looked at out of idle curiosity by someone from the Analysis Corporation? Or was there something else involved in that? Well, based on our investigation, it would appear that something else was involved in that. And we're going to be issuing a report on this, but the bottom line here is the Analysis Corporation was headed by John Brennan. And John Brennan, of course, denied any type of knowledge, and then, of course, apologized and summarily went after the employee and disciplined the employee. But what was found during this little soiree into the passport office break-in? And the reason I throw Biden into here, because Biden was part of the oversight committee during that period of time, as was Brennan, who was counterintelligence advisor to the president, unpaid, of course, concurrent with his position at the Analysis Corporation. So could this be payback for damage control? Or could this be payback for what is known by Mr. Brennan?
Yeah, with that, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we got a couple of pieces of news we're going to hit, and then take your phone calls at 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. I want to thank, again, Larry Grathwohl for spending half the show with us. A lot of good information. And if you guys joined us late, go back into the archives and listen to that. Coming up, news and your phone calls for the last hour. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. This Tuesday, January 29, 2013. We'll be right back after these short messages.
If you're stumped, you don't know what kind of gift to give to a friend or a loved one, I'm telling you, you must go to 4physics.com. That's the numeral 4, PHYSICS.com. This is your one-stop shopping palace. That's the only way I can put it. I could spend easily an hour on this website. Innovative, fun, educational. There are games, books, weather instruments, unique time-telling devices, jewelry, optical devices, laboratory equipment. Let me give you an example. We all know we can tell time with a sundial. You've seen those advertised. Did you know that you could tell time by the stars? At 4physics.com, you can buy a horologium nocturnum. This was a navigational device used in the 15th century by navigators at night to tell time by the stars. It's beautifully crafted in the shape of a pendant made of bronze and pewter or gold and silver. Absolutely a stunning gift. I would be proud to give it to anyone. You must go to 4physics.com. Even if you're not stumped, that's 4physics. That's the numeral 4, PHYSICS.com. It's your one-stop shopping palace. Any problems that you have, I don't know what to get Grandpa, I don't know what to get my loved one, that's unique, you will find it at 4physics.com. Please take my word for it. Go to the website, but give yourself a lot of time because you're not going to want to leave. 4physics.com.
Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. You've heard me talk about Gremlin firearms, but did you know, have you taken a moment to go up and visit in British Columbia? Why not? Hey, if you live in Florida, it's only about 3,000 miles or 3,500 mile trip. Look, if you can't go up in person, if you're not around British Columbia, if you're not in the Campbell River area of British Columbia, pay them a virtual visit. Granland Firearms. That's granlandfirearms.com. Right now on their website, they've got a gun stock list. They've got basically an inventory of what they have. If you're a hunter, my goodness, it's a hunter's paradise. If you are into survival, they've got all sorts of equipment for that. They even have, and seriously, I got to tell you, this is a favorite of mine. A black men's T-shirt with a deer head on it. It's a great shirt. $20. Camo caps. I don't do caps. $15. That's of course they've got the cap's got their logo on it. But it's in terms of guns. How about a Marlin 336? How about a Mossberg 500? I'm going to tell you what. I'm looking through these prices, and a lot of these prices are better than I've seen in the States. But they've got a complete line of hunting supplies, hunting gear, all sorts of things. And if you go on their website, make sure you check out the photo gallery. They've got guns for sale, photographs of the guns for sale, and of course, one of my favorites, the trained Walker Hound puppies that were born back in July. And of course, you can see the lovely faces of the Granlins on the site as well. They also have information about firearms courses. Pay them a visit, folks. That's GranlandFirearms.com. To go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the link to Granland Firearms, and be sure to sign their guest book. Tell them the Hagmann and Hagmann Report sent you, and tell a friend about their company too.
Doug Hagmann, one guy that doesn't need a bullhorn to get your attention.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour of this Tuesday, January 29th edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. The first hour and a half, we were joined by Larry Grathwohl, infiltrator of the Weather Underground Group, headed up by Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn, the people behind Obama and his political career, and much more. And then we started getting into news, and what we're going to do is take your phone calls at 661-244-9839 after we cover a few pieces of important news. Kids were scared and shocked today as a Cary Grove drill to include shooting blanks in hallways took place. School shooting drill planned for tomorrow in the far northwestern suburbs of Chicago has many parents upset. According to a letter from the Cary Grove High School, Principal Jay Sargent said there was a code red drill at the school on Wednesday. It will include somebody shooting blanks from a gun in the hallway in an effort to provide teachers and students with the familiarity and the sound of gunfire.
What in the world is going on here? What in the world, Joe, is going? And listeners, what is going on that this is taking place?
Yeah, and pretty much from what I gather, these people didn't know it was a drill at first. Some of them didn't know it was a drill. The parents did not get the emails. People did not get the letters. People weren't able...
Even if you did get the email or letter, what is going on? Folks, please help me understand.
Yeah.
Are we missing something here?
We have mock assaults by our military on our own soil in multiple cities, 4 different places now in 2 days: Houston, Miami, Los Angeles, and now Chicago. By military personnel firing blanks. Some Black Hawk helicopters flying around low. I mean, if you were to walk out there, you would not know it was an exercise unless you knew in advance.
I mean, to me, this is beyond the pale for any type of for anything. Can you imagine taking your son, your daughter to school and running into this? Or did this happen during school time, or was this at night?
No, this was during class.
All right. So, folks, look, there's something wrong here. Obviously, we know that, but there's no reason for this. There is absolutely no legitimate reason. And I saw a video today at the very end of the video, and I don't know what city it was, but it was a black gentleman that was on the video who said, "Well, if it helps keep the kids safe, if it's for the children, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Now, where did we hear that before, that mantra? If it's for the children, I'm all for it. Or if it keeps the children safe.
I want to play this audio clip. This is Alan Dershowitz on Piers Morgan stating it's wrong, racist, and bigoted to say that guns are quintessentially American. Now, I listened to this audio and found many things that I could pick out.
Take your blood pressure.
Now, this is about a 2-minute and 45-second clip. Listen very carefully to everything that is said in this clip because there is a lot going on here.
And it's wrong, and it's racist, and it's bigoted to say that guns are quintessentially American. They may represent a part of America, but my grandparents who came over from Poland and live in Brooklyn, New York, are just as much Americans. People who came over from Ireland, people who came over from Italy, we're just as much Americans if we live on the coast. And we have a right to define the America that we want to live in, and we have the obligation to win politically, to vote for people to put gun control as a high priority. They put it as a number one priority. We who favor gun control put it as a 16th or 17th priority. So it's our fault, not the NRA's
And the
fault.
important thing of getting people like Alex Jones on this show is to hear him actually say that he believed President Bush, the American administration under him, were responsible for 9/11, and that is why he wants Americans armed to defend themselves against that kind of murderous tyranny. And it's the most dangerous rhetoric I have heard in a very long time.
But it's very important that he be exposed on your show because decent Americans don't want to be associated with that kind of paranoid view of American history. They don't want to believe that our government is capable of engaging in the kind of tyranny that he fears. Government does a great deal of good for people. Yes, there are reasons to constrain government. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights. Justice Scalia, who wrote the opinion, said very clearly the Second Amendment permits for reasonable regulation, for prevention of people like him from getting guns, for prevention of crazy people with long records, criminal records from getting guns. We have to do more to fulfill what the real meaning of the Second Amendment is. Reasonable access to guns for self-protection and for hunting, and there's no room in America for these semi-automatic, automatic, and other kinds of weapons that are simply designed to create mass havoc.
I believe that an increasing majority of Americans do not agree with the likes of Alex Jones. I think they realize a tipping point has been reached. When you have a movie theater shot up and then a school, elementary school, enough is enough, and they mustn't let the agenda be driven by people like him.
And when the NRA gets up and says the solution to it is to arm teachers in elementary schools and to give kids guns and to load our
Create
society
the Wild
up with
West.
guns,
It's lunacy.
We don't want to live in that
Alan,
America.
thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
When we come back, a man who truly does believe the solution to gun violence is yet more guns. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, on why he wants armed volunteers outside schools.
All right, that was Alan Dershowitz.
Now, you know what, Joe, before you go on, look, I don't have a lot of money, but I would buy in a heartbeat right now. In fact, I know, obviously, Piers Morgan is not listening to this broadcast, but I would buy him a ticket back to the UK. I would dip into, I would sell my vehicle to buy him a plane ticket back to the UK if he would go and stay there.
Well, Piers Morgan actually said that if the U.S. doesn't repeal the Second Amendment, he'll leave.
Good.
Bye.
Good. And take Dershowitz. Yeah, that guy.
Now let's break down what he said.
Yes, it's important. And we play clips. Joe picks them out. I mean, there are so many that could be played, but this is important. So go ahead and break this down, Joe.
All right. Piers Morgan, we all know, has been on a anti-Second Amendment, anti-freedom crusade on the Communist News Network now for as long as the Sandy Hook shooting has taken place. Now, we have him interviewing this Alan Dershowitz, who goes on to say it is wrong,
right, correct,
racist, and bigoted to think that guns are quintessentially American.
Well,
He goes on to say,
racist. I mean,
you have people like my grandmother and my grandfather who come here and they want to change things. Well, you don't come here to change the laws. We can't go to other countries and say, hey, Turkey, we don't like Sharia law or wherever that is.
Right.
Change it. That's not how it works. Okay, that's first and foremost. He goes on to say,
don't jump away from that because go back. Folks, aren't you a little bit upset at how these people throw the word racism and the accusation of racism around?
Right, that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
I have some definitions, the actual definitions of what he says wrong. First, he says wrong. It's wrong. Okay, that means it's an injurious, unfair, an injurious, unfair, or unjust act, an action or conflict inflicting harm without due provocation or just cause, a violation or invasion of the legal rights of another.
Right.
That's one of the definitions. That's the first one for wrong. Second is racist. A belief that race is a primary deterrent of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race.
So,
third, bigoted.
Wow.
A person who is intolerantly devoted to his or her own opinion and prejudice, especially with regards or treats the members of a group as a racial or ethnic group with hatred and intolerance. And that's everything we see coming from these people. Okay? So breaking it down in his own words, he's the biggest racist person who's wrong here. But in continuing, Morgan goes on to say that he had Alex Jones on the show and that Jones said on the show that Bush and people under him in his administration were responsible for 9/11, which is nothing close to what he said. He said elements of the military-industrial complex, criminal elements of the military-industrial complex. So you can read in and out however that you want.
If I can just say this, I after watching it a number of times, that is Alex Jones' appearance on Piers Morgan, and Keith Hansen and I have talked. In fact, Keith Hansen called me up the next day and said Alex Jones did more to torpedo, more adversely affected our cause. And I didn't say anything to Keith, but in the subsequent conversation I had with him, I disagree with him terribly. Disagree with him. And I told Keith, I said, look, I believe, and I'll say this right out here, I believe Alex Jones did more good in the time that he had. Look, it's not a perfect scenario there. You're in enemy territory, but I believe that Jones got a lot of information out in a short period of time, more information than probably any other guest in the history of that program. He covered so many topics. Now, you might not agree with his delivery, but the information he got out was just amazing. So
this is the most important part of the audio. He goes on to Piers Morgan after he says that about how he believes Jones said 9/11 was done by Bush and people under him in his administration. He says this Alan Dershowitz said there are Americans. There are that's the reason that Americans want to stay distant from people like that and that type of paranoia. And when he goes on to say people don't want to believe that their government is that evil. People don't want to believe in the paranoia that their government will carry out these acts. Not addressing the fact that it's documented history, that it has been done in the past over and over and over. He's not stating or arguing the fact that it is happening, has happened, or will happen. He's saying, well, it's a paranoid view, and people don't want to associate with that, nor do the American people want to believe that evil is really here on the earth. And that bothered me. I mean, big time.
So there's a huge difference between not wanting to believe it and it actually taking place in the historical precedent we have.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even answer or address the core issue. It's that feeling or the lack of belief that it can happen, which is totally it misses the issue entirely.
Yeah. And then they go on to say people like him should not have guns. And there's much more breakdown I have on that. But
Joe, I mean, what? Seriously, people like him shouldn't have guns. I would put a gun in his hand and have him next to me in a foxhole fighting the tyrannical government before the metrosexual Piers Morgan or Alan Dershowitz. I pronounced it first time correctly. You know, I mean, think about this. At what point do we stop being civil? And I say this, we can't. Well, no. At what point do we stop being?
There's a point where we can stop complying with ungodly orders and ungodly laws trying to be imposed on us. That is the extent where we can.
Let me rephrase that question. At what point do we start getting angry? Or angry to the point of emotion, you know, you're getting away from your keyboard and saying, okay, I've had enough now. Now it's you've crossed the line. Now I've got to actually act. When do we reach that point?
I think we'll know when that time comes, and I don't think we'll know a moment sooner.
Really? I mean,
it's going to be like that, yeah. We're not fighting just the most advanced military technology ever in the history of the world, where they have the ability to look and see and listen to everything you say and do no matter where you are in the world, cell phone or not, computer or not.
But isn't it a numbers game? Because they can't be everywhere.
Yeah, well, down in a numbers game, but their drones can. Their UAVs with their armed UAVs. You got the United Nations who have their humanitarian troops, which are death squads, all ready to go. This is more than a physical battle, and we need to understand that, because if we don't, we are going to fall very fast.
No, and I personally and wholeheartedly agree that we are in a battle between good versus evil, and it's a spiritual battle as much as it is a practical battle, and we need the armor of God and the spirit of discernment. Mm-hmm. But I got to say this.
And as marginalization continues, Chris Matthews today said people that believe in border protection, who believe you could stop somebody from coming into this country by high towers or more drones or more people working there, they are right-wingers or idiots.
So what does he then believe? What's his solution? He doesn't offer a solution, does he?
No, his solution is the Obama solution, what he's paid to talk about, which is the destruction of America through subversion, which they've already done. Everything's in place. The logistics are there. The legislation's there. The economic system collapse and mechanism controls are there. The personnel to carry out any operation on U.S. soil is there.
Right.
And it's just a matter of when.
Well, something that bothered me a great deal in the interview that Obama gave to the nation, where he very subtly mentioned Fox News and Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, I saw something about he threatened them.
It wasn't really a threat. It was a
I don't buy it.
It was kind of a veiled threat in a way. But
it gives credence to Fox News, for the people who are of the free mindset, where Fox News is just another mind trap.
But wait a second. No, look, I understand what you're saying there, but folks, to me this is important, because this plants the seed in the minds of people where, okay, now, I mean, it's almost like resurrecting the fairness doctrine, but in a more aggressive way. In other words, they are delegitimizing people, because even though you might not agree with Fox News, what if they said, and I know that we're not even in the same caliber, but what if they said the Hagmann report? What if he said that? Okay, my point is this, or even whatever show. The point is this: by mentioning that, you're actually suggesting censorship. I mean, there's no middle ground here, in my view. He's actually saying that this is a danger. And Clinton tried this back in the 90s, and don't forget, he blamed Limbaugh and right-wing conservative talk. He blamed Oklahoma City on that. Yeah. So we're seeing this happen again, but more refined, and I think that we are going to see blowback or not blowback, but I think we're going to see an attack on programs like ours, programs, whether you, I mean,
Fox News is just a controlled opposition. It's controlled theater, opposition theater, whatever you want to call it. When Bush was in power, 9/11 happened. All the people that were asking questions were called, terrorists. And now that Obama's in office and Benghazi and all this other stuff happened, they want answers all of a sudden. But no, bring up 9/11.
But no, they don't. And now, this I agree with you. Okay, Fox News won't touch issues in certain parts of Benghazi. I can tell you, I can't tell you a story, but so I've got a problem with Fox News.
Yeah.
So you're correct, but put anything. The fact that he would name any news program or person or entity there, to me, says that there will be a war, a type of censorship against programs and programming and people who don't toe the line in terms of or who are anti-administration, against that ideology.
Yeah. One more piece of news, then we're going to go to the phones. Egypt's protests reveal deficit of trust in Muslim Brotherhood. Open defiance of Egypt's president in the streets. Protests show how much the Muslim Brotherhood needs to leave Islam outside the door of democracy. And it is talking about Egypt being in the possibility of a complete governmental collapse. And the military saying that the Muslim Brotherhood is losing control of Egypt. Something to definitely keep your eye on. And we'll talk more about that.
Is it possible that the people can actually overcome? People are resilient, many people, but then you've got that. Well,
it depends on how much we get involved. How much? I mean, why do you think we sent them all the military weapons and planes and money?
Yeah, that's true, and I actually just had to stop and. It's almost disheartening, isn't it, folks, to hear this?
Yeah, especially if you know the backstory of the Mubarak overthrow, where they said he was killing protesters, and so they had to overthrow him, and now the same thing's happening again, but they're giving them weapons this time. And they're an extreme form of the Muslim Brotherhood, carrying out executions, persecuting people for converting from Islam.
It's the same Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, that we're, you could follow the footsteps in and out of the White House, and of course the Muslim Brotherhood, the same Muslim Brotherhood that the Council on American Islamic Relations is protecting, and the same Muslim Brotherhood that is being paid for by the Saudis, and of course are being supported by the Saudis. Saudi money, the revolving door or the pneumatic tubes from Saudi. I mean, think of the bank. When you go to the bank and put your money in the pneumatic tubes, and the tube gets sucked up into the bank. Well, we have those from Saudi Arabia into the White House, and
let's go on some calls.
That's please.
We're gonna pick up where we left off yesterday. 111. Interesting number. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Is that me? Hello?
That is you.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Yeah, can you hear it?
Well, I thought I would just bring up a couple of points that you kind of hit on the black helicopters that are swarming all over the place now. And, why is this coming about? And I started to think about the portal that opened up on, the inauguration, and how that demon that was supposed to come out of the portal was the militarized demon of Satan's police force. And the drills that are going on aren't just military. They're working in tandem with local police. So it's militarizing the police force, you know what I mean? It's a merger between the military and police. So it's a domestic police force. And a while back I had read an article.
I don't know if you can hear us now, folks, but we got cut off somehow. We lost all of our phone connections into the switchboard and also to Christians United Broadcasting Network. So that's an interesting situation. If you don't mind, isn't this great live radio? How this works? The people in chat, if you can just do this, if you can just okay, you hear us? Just let us know. Hello. Okay, thank you, Becca, for. But anyway, it's an interesting time when we are when this happens. We have redundancy upon redundancy built into the system, yet we are now. Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Joe's pointing at me here in the studio, and perhaps we might be back up.
There we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
All right.
All right.
Go ahead, Joe.
All right. I don't know where you left off, but we got our caller back from 111. We're going to go back and see if she is still there. All right, there? Caller. Yes, we are.
Okay, so the chain of islands connects up to the mainland. They built these big poles. I don't know if that's where I left off. But anyway, so we were like the prototype. Everybody was all excited. It was supposed to be for if there was evacuation, and of course they would be able to monitor traffic flow and everything. And at that period of time, I just got a really creepy feeling. I said, something's not right with us. But anyway, we were one of the first areas as a prototype for that. Now, just recently, I got a survey from NOAA, and it came out of New York. And they sent me a survey asking how I got my weather news and what would be my plans for evacuation and that whole kind of a thing. And I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of weird. I never got one of these before. And so we've had a lot of helicopters fly over our place real low and everything. I'm in the Upper Keys, and of course we're in an evacuation area for whatever, really at this point, whatever, whether there's invasion into the country or whether there's a weather situation or whatever, because we're like sea level down here. And so I don't know. I just think it's the portals opened up, and we've got this militarized police force. So anyway, today I was reading through the news, and I came across on, I think it might have been Stan Deo's site. They posted the thing about the Denver airport, and then I was looking at that poster in the Denver airport, the artwork of that militarized police officer or whatever he is, stormtrooper, with the curved sword in one hand stabbing into the dove, and then the assault weapon and the gas mask on, and the long trench coat, and the people underground, and the rainbow coming down into the underground, which who knows what that is. And then there was another article about Plum Island,
right?
And how that was created, bioterrorism created after World War II through Operation Paperclip. They brought over some Nazi scientists, and they've been doing who knows what over there, and with viruses and bacteria and stuff. So I started to think about how this flu has been spreading all over the country, this really weird strain of flu. And after the hurricane went through, I mean, did that disturb that laboratory up there in any way with that storm that went through? And, was there material that was maybe taken out of that laboratory? I mean, who knows what they've got in that place, with viruses and...
It's a good question. I certainly don't know. Anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like this is like a really odd strain of virus that's going around.
I can also second that.
plus, you know, everybody that seems to be getting this flu shot is getting sick, and then I just recently heard that they're looking to start up again with the, you know, trying to see if they can cross over the bird flu, you know, into
right, and the cross
you know,
species.
It just come out of that laboratory in Plum Island, and people got real sick after that hurricane went through there with upper respiratory stuff and everything. And you know, I'm just saying it has something to do with this. Joe's right about this is more than just stuff that's going on. We're dealing with a whole spiritual realm here. This forces that have been released on us. We are definitely under judgment here. You know, I mean, this is not. I mean, yes, everybody should have some type of a weapon for protection in case there's, you know, criminals roaming around or something. But there's no way we're going to take on any type of situation other than just maybe home protection or anything. We've got militarized stuff going on. This is like stormtrooper stuff. This is like beyond, you know.
No, you're exactly correct, and this is something, caller, that Joe and I were talking about, and I want to get into a little bit as we. The one thing that we're looking at, when you mentioned portals, and I go back to the program that we did with Russ Dizdar.
Exactly.
I don't know, you know, look, you know, I didn't really, when being part of that program, I didn't really grasp certain things that Russ Dizdar said, and then I went back and listened to it again, and then as I'm doing research about mind control, okay, now, people, you know, I know you're out there thinking, oh, come on, you know, you roll your eyes and you think, oh, Doug, you know, you're getting into some really tall weeds here when you start talking. But I got to tell you something, you know, the church committee back in the 70s, think about this, folks, and caller, think about this. The CIA for 30 years appropriated 6% of their operating budget to mind control. 44 universities across the United States were heavily involved into mind control experiments. Think about that. Think about the money, the assets for 30 years, 6% of the operating budget for the CIA, mind control. And we're not to believe today that maybe they're, for example, some of the shootings, you know, the people in or the homes in Lanza and those people, could that not be an artifact of that 30? And obviously, they didn't stop at the time of the church committee; they just reformatted and kept on going. So you're right. I mean, there could very well be Manchurian candidates, cutouts, if you will.
Yeah.
People have to start thinking about this.
A good guest also, besides Russ, another one who has done serious research on this. They even put him in jail, Fritz Springmeier.
Oh, yes.
If you can get hold of Fritz.
We're going to have Fritz on.
He goes through the whole generational families of these bloodlines that, and you know, they train up youth, okay, and these children and stuff, like Ted Bundy, he was one of the bloodlines. You know, not all of their bloodline turns around and becomes like a politician, or they have terror cells too, people that they set loose with triggers. That, like Russ was talking about, with triggers. They go out there and commit these crimes, these murders, and this mayhem and all of this stuff, because this is part of their whole cycle of terror.
And you know what, caller, what you're talking about right now, and what Russ was talking about, and what Fritz Springmeier talks about as well, I'll mention this again. I know people are probably getting tired of me mentioning this, but every Saturday night, Toronto, AM 640 out of Toronto, A View from Space. It's a 3.5-hour program, hosted by a gentleman by the name of Gary Bell. This last week and this coming week, he's talking about the very things you're talking about, caller. The triggers, the mind control type thing, and it's well worth your time. So again, I believe he starts at 11 o'clock at night. But that said, it's well worth the time. But you're right, caller. I mean, and we don't know, but we do know. And as Joe said too, that this is more than the earthly application. There's a spiritual part of this. There's the
it's the Luciferian agenda. That's what it is. It's been released into the ethers now. These demons are, in fact, I think Steve had an article up about the portals being opened in, like with Bigfoot and all of this stuff, these demonic entities that you get, that over the years people have had glimpses of them, and these things just then disappear again because there's portals that open, and then people get a glimpse of it, but then that portal closes up again. Okay?
Right.
So it's, so...
And people might think, wow, this is just crazy talk, but they don't realize, and a lot of people, and I didn't realize this up until a very short period of time ago, that I mean the Nazis had experimented with this, with these portals or these the physics involved in, and I'm not sure physics is a proper word, but the science involved in the space-time continuums.
Well, that's what they're doing over at CERN.
Right. Well,
that's
yes.
what that is.
Yes. Basically, yes.
Yeah. They're trying to open a portal, and they're saying that there could be stuff that comes through it. I'm sure there will be.
Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine being like a college intern, signing up? Okay, you're working at CERN, and I'm chuckling about this, but it's really not funny. But hey, I didn't sign on for this, and seeing some grotesque thing happen in the portal.
At the Denver airport, they got demon horses with red eyes. Over at CERN, they've got Hindu death figures. I mean,
it's crazy.
People are out of their minds. You know what I mean? They're Luciferian demonic people. I mean, I don't think I'm out of my mind. I mean, I'd be out of my mind if I didn't see it.
Well, that's right. But people have this normalcy bias, this tendency to think, well, that's just science fiction. That's just make believe. But no, I mean. To realize that there are people involved in the experimentation of this is just it blows my mind. I mean, it really does when you think about it. But hey, so no, you're very astute. You're very astute. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll let you move on to somebody else. I've been taking up too much time here.
Enjoy the keys.
Okay, thank you.
God bless you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. But that's one place I'd like to be right now is on the keys.
Explains the same number for the whole number. I was wondering. I didn't know. I looked that number up, and it went back to New York Times. There's a lot of people who said it was a New York Times number, so I wasn't sure, and it was there for a couple of days, but just out of the continental U.S.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to...
And that does happen, by the way. Sorry.
Area code 484, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hi, Doug and Joe. You guys have a great show going on again tonight, as usual.
Well, thanks.
Doug earlier had mentioned something about the line in the sand, and I remember Joe saying something about, we'll know when that's going to be, and I think he's right. I think that God's going to play an important part of that signal, that we're patient, we're waiting for them to show their hand, and we being anybody that wants to associate with this side, I would think, are going to have to be soldiers in this fight. The ultimate fight against good and evil that Steve mentions a lot. Steve Quayle mentions a lot. You know, these things that are coming upon the earth that'll cause men's hearts to fail. The portals that this lady that was just on was talking about. These things are really here. They are really happening. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So, I just pray for.
Caller, let me ask you this. You said we'll know the line in the sand, or when it's crossed, we'll know it. How? And I don't want to sound ignorant in asking this question, but how are we going to know it? I mean, is it when the shooting starts? Is it when the communications get cut off, or if they get cut off? I mean, how are we going to know what that trigger point is, or what's going to happen when that line is crossed?
I think that I can only speak for myself. I don't know what it's going to be for everyone. But it's, with the military, you have leadership that says, okay, today we're packing up and we're going to this destination and we're going to shoot the bad guys. We're going to see the incremental increase of what's coming our direction from, whether it be the administration, whether it be the UN, what I consider basically the evil portion of what's here. And as that builds, we're going to see the electric power go away. We're going to see the monetary system go down, and those things are going to start this chain of events where it's going to basically put brother against brother. And because there's no direct leadership on our side, that we have one person that we look towards, whether it would have been a person, for instance, whether it had been a popular radio show host, or whether it had been a popular person in, say, for instance, the NRA, or one of those groups that stands up and says, I will lead the people. I don't think it's going to be that. I think that regionally it's going to be riots in Philadelphia that will cause people to band together on both sides that will snowball. I think it will be regions of just lost my train of thought. Regions of martial law that will be enacted, whether it would be because of a storm that's brought in, that like the storm Sandy that came in, that everybody knows that hurricanes don't turn 90 degrees left. So, whether it be something like that causes a regional event that causes martial law, whether it be, one of the suitcase nukes that nobody's found. There's many of these things that could be. I don't know if it's going to be a line in the sand, much like, Battle of the Bulge or one of those type of events. I think it will definitely be different for you than it is for me. If you have children, and if you love your children, the line in the sand will be when that person comes through your front door, regardless of who they are, they want to cause your family harm. But on a mass scale, in the entire United States or the entire world, I think that there will be many smaller lines in the sand that will geographically draw a larger line in the sand. I know for me here where I am, if somebody comes and wants to take what I have, if you ask me, that's one thing. If you force me, that's another. I plan on dying on my feet instead of on my knees. So there will be a line in the sand that I will draw personally, the protection of my family. The things that I own are mere items. If you want the things, I don't care. But when you want life, that's different. I draw the line at life, and it will be mine first before you take theirs. And I don't know how many people out there will draw that line. I don't know where Alex Jones draws his line. I've heard some different things from his side of the fence of, I know that he's a strong man, that he will not pull first, that he will not shoot first. And I don't know when they're going to, pull the SWAT team on him. I'm sure we'll hear about it. As far as somebody like Rush Limbaugh, when you get people that have the money behind them, they don't have the same lines that I do. They don't have the same lines that you might not have. So
that's an interesting point that you raised too, because the higher profile. I mean, obviously we're not as high profile as Alex Jones, and Alex Jones doesn't have the money that Rush Limbaugh has, and so it's an interesting point because we're in different stations in life and different positions, as well as different parts of the country. So you could very well be right. There could be different scenarios for different people, but wow. I'm of the opinion, though, if our forefathers would be alive today, they would already have been. I mean,
that's irrelevant, though.
They would have already started shooting.
Like the caller said, we're in different times.
Yeah, that's true. That's well.
No, I think even the forefathers being here today would. And obviously I can't speak for them, and I can only look back through the history that I learned in public school, which is kind of a bad thing, so I'm learning it as I'm getting older. I think they would have practiced restraint. There was a time when they said, they had groups that had gotten together and they were meeting, and they said, look, we all agree that we don't agree with what's going on. We all agree that there's a problem with the king. We all agree that there's, these things. And at that time we didn't have the Bill of Rights. We didn't have the Constitution. I mean, it was in their minds that this is what we would like to have. But for them, the tyranny was different. It was part of that was different. It was a distance away. The king was, a faraway place. But it was the king's people that were over here that were causing, a lot of the problems under the guise of color, if you will. So they drew a line in the sand and they said, to arms, let's go right now. Today's the day. They're coming. We know they're coming. And it may be that type of event, and the message that goes out may be a tweet. It may be, a Facebook. Maybe that's why they're looking to shut that communication system down. There may be that type of event where there's enough people. There are people out there. I mean, we all know who they are, and if you don't, you haven't done your research. Start researching groups that do stand and that will stand, whether it be a law enforcement group or whether it be military groups. There are some very powerful people on our side, some, those returning veterans that, were there yesterday, not there today, that are on our side that know exactly what they're going to be doing. So, that having been said, I think that as those people have their little groups of friends and I'm not really talking about the militia type groups, the guys that go out and hang out in the woods and camouflage, but even those groups, the groups that have been put on lists, if you will, they'll all know that, and even those groups will have separate, they'll have their own line in the sand. But if I think that if there's a nuke that goes off in a city, I think it's going to be one more nail in the coffin, so to speak, of what's coming, and whether or not we react at that point. We didn't react in the Sandy Hook thing because everybody's still trying to figure out whether or not this is faked or whether or not it's real, or it was real for some people. What was that? And what I'm seeing out of it is different than what, my wife sees out of it or what my friends see out of it. So
I'm with you there.
Defining event. Well, I think, if a nuke goes off in Washington, D.C., I think pretty much most of the country's going to know it was a bad thing, regardless of who set it off, it was a bad thing. Or if it went off in Los Angeles or whatever. And I don't know if that's what's coming, but I'm just saying, if that were a type of event, you don't know for a short period of time who did it. Was it their side trying to make it look like our side? Was it our side trying to make it look like their side? I mean, it's one of those things where you're back at the Reichstag Hotel again, trying to figure out who burned the place down. And is that something that they're going to do to force our hand? Is it going to be a SWAT team on a high-profile target like Alex Jones, or is he going to get SWAT teams? And that's the line in the sand. It might be the line in the sand for a bunch of people. They're coming after the Second Amendment. We know that. And once the Second Amendment's gone, they're coming after all the rest of them. And they're already chipping away at the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment and the rest of them. You know, the states' rights, the whole thing's coming down. And because we're allowing them to do this, we're going to have to fight to get it back. It's going to be a shame. But as far as me, you know, I mean, I have my own line in the sand, and, you know, my personal protection is one thing, and the protection of my loved ones is another. But I don't know as far as the United States as a whole or people as a whole. And there's a bunch of people out there buying guns that shoots holes in everything that Piers Morgan's coming up with. You know, we believe most of the Americans are saying we should turn in our guns. Apparently, they're not reading the news that, you know, the largest gun show or the largest outdoor show in America was shut down because everybody said, screw you, we're not coming if you're not going to have guns. You know, and it's like, look, people are starting to stand up and speak. I think that Obama's going to come up with an executive order because he's just going to get tired of it. And he knows that will be it. I think it's going to be very soon. I've heard 3 or 4 different things that are not sounding good. One of them came from Napolitano about the cyber 9/11. Well, that tells me they're going to take down the communication grid, whether it be for the tweets so people can't get the message out, hey, this is it, or whatever. So I'm, you know, major 9/11 in that respect. Look for alternative ways of communication, smoke signals, flags, I don't know, flares, something. But it's going to go away. And she said imminent. So that's, you know, there's a clue. And then the whole thing in Iran and Syria, that's a mess in and of itself. And we got Russian troops on our soil, and we're fighting them over there. I'm not getting that one.
One article I wanted to hit on was a U.S.-backed plan to launch chemical weapon attack on Syria and blame it on Assad regime. Leaked emails from the defense contractor refers to chemical weapons, saying the idea is approved by Washington. Obama issued a warning to the Syrian President Assad last month that the use of chemical warfare was totally unacceptable. So leaked emails from the White House proved that the Obama administration gave the green light to use a chemical weapon attack on Syria as a pretext for the false flag event to go to a more full-scale war on Syria.
Yeah, that is a mess.
Here's a question that I have, and I haven't heard anybody say anything about this, and I've been listening to a lot of different people a lot. You know, all the websites that are popular in everybody's minds, you guys, Alex+Jones, Steve Quayle, and Stan Dale, and a whole bunch of others. There's one question in my mind, and that is this. These things are treasonous acts. No one anywhere that I have heard has said, okay, you guys can do whatever you want to do, all these little games that you're going to play. You can get done playing these games. But the Constitution labels this as treason, and we are going to come after you, and we're going to prosecute you for treason. That is a treasonous act, whether it comes from him, whether it's an executive order, whether it's anybody in my mind that swears an oath to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States, that then subverts the Constitution on any of the amendments is guilty of treason. Now, whether it's written that way in law, I don't know. I'll have to look at that. But in my mind, if you're coming after my guns, that's a treasonous act because the law says I can have them. The Constitution says I can have them, and that's just notifying you that that's what God told you and me, that I can have them. So why is nobody saying, you know what, let's start petitions for treason against anyone that would subvert any of the amendments of the Constitution that they swore an oath to uphold and defend? I don't care if they're communists. I don't care if they're not. I don't care what side of the fence they're on. If they go and say, you know, I think that we don't need the Second Amendment anymore, and they're an official that swore an oath, that's a treasonous act. You're going to be prosecuted. And, you know, back in the day, that wasn't a very good thing to have happen.
No, Carl, you're right. We're up against the show, or end of the show. Okay. We're going to let you go, and I'm going to respond to what you said.
Great call.
Yeah, thank you. The reason these people aren't held accountable for their actions is because they are paid to do what they're doing. They are part of a bigger agenda. They're just the faces of whatever they represent, whether the legislative, judicial, or the executive branch. The real powers are the controllers of the money powers of the New World Order, and that's where they get their orders from. So.
Great call. Folks, I want to thank you very much for joining us, both Joe and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. God bless you. Until tomorrow night, take care. Stay safe.
Have a good night.